the speed, shoots, save, Binnington. And with that save, he's got 151 wins as a Blue, tying Mike Liute for the most wins in franchise history.
That's what it sounded like last night right here in your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN with Alex Ferrario. I'm Brandon Kiley. No T-Bone today. Jordan Deacon back in the studio for us as we are broadcasting live at the E&B Granite Studios out of the Centene Community Ice Center. Blues get a much-needed win. They did not do so in regulation because they do not do so in regulation.
That's fine. The points don't matter. It's like, whose line is it anyway?
They have now gone 8 consecutive regular season games without a regulation win. The last time they had such a streak was 2022. Alex, you may remember that as the 8-game losing streak. After they had started 3-0, they go to the 8-game losing streak. Doug Armstrong comes out about 7 games in and says, hey, the coach is not the problem, but let's set that aside for a moment. Definitely no similarities here.
Hey, they won, okay? It's not a losing streak. They won.
We'll get to Jordan Binnington here in just a moment. Big storyline last night is that he is now tied Mike Liute as the winningest goalie in Blues history. I thought the story of the night was the top line once again. It's been, to me, the story since Robert Thomas's return to the lineup. Alex, in 2 games with Thomas back, Booch, Thomas, and Kyrou have played nearly 30 minutes together. They have outshot the opposition in those 2 games, 16-8 when they are on the ice at 5-on-5. More impressively, they have outchanced the opposition 22-9 when those 3 are on the ice. The Blues top line looks like a legitimate top line in the NHL right now. This was the big question that I had. Would we see it? I thought Kyrou had another good game last night. Overall, that trio looks very good. What are you seeing from them right now, Alex?
I'm seeing everything right now. Like, you finally found that Mr. Fix-It line for the Blues. Now, their scoring chances, there's got to be more conversion on those. But look, you played 2 games together since the start of the season, because remember, these lines were only put together in short sample sizes when Drew Bannister needed a spark. They weren't together from start to finish. Now they're playing from start to finish. You're seeing all aspects of the game. The start of the hockey game, Thomas, Kyrou, Buchnevich, they were creating a lot of zone time. Now, they didn't get any goals out of it, but they were generating scoring chances, which you ask any player in that locker room, just as important it is to find the back of the net, you got to find a way to pull momentum on your side and keep it there, and that's those scoring chances. That's what that line can do now. Why can it do it now and why not in the past? Because, look, I'm not going to be a hypocrite. I said you can't play Kyrou with these guys. Man, Kyrou's playing a different brand of hockey with these guys right now. You give this kid the flowers because, man, he is forechecking. He is displacing guys away from the puck. But they're creating offensive zone time, and what that does is it wears the other team down. When they can't get the puck off of their stick for a good 30 to 45 seconds, as Joe Vitale will tell you, the galactic acid builds up. And then those guys start making bad decisions on the ice. And what do? You slowly move guys off the ice, bring the next line on, and then that's how you generate the scoring chances. So you're just seeing this team now play a brand of hockey that realizes, hey, we can play as a top line when we're on the ice. Other teams can't stop us, and we're going to force it down their throat, essentially. I think the Blues right now, and I've said this all year long, I think they've got like 3 third lines and hopefully right now a top line. They're missing that second line, right? I believe that on a good, we were talking about this before the show today with Luke Korak, on a good contending team, I think Robert Thomas, Jordan Kyrou, Pavel Buchnevich, and I can listen to the argument on Jake Neighbours, are all legit top 6 forwards. I think that's where it ends. I think you have 4 of your top 6 right now on the roster. You're hoping Jimmy Snuggerud adds himself to that, and you're hoping that Dalibor Dvorsky adds himself to that group. There is your top 6. Top 6.
You're not there yet, but you can see the makings of what could be a top 6. I think you're missing a legit game changer in that group. I would like to see one outside addition that is a real, Mitch Marner type. Not to speak on any specific names that could potentially be available after the season,
Why
but
would we do that?
Could be. That's what I believe this team still continues to be missing, even with those new additions. But you're starting to see the makings of what it should look like long term. And that has always been my goal this season. I can't speak for the team. I think they had loftier expectations. But for me, my goal was always, can you see the building blocks? What does Philip Broberg look like in this group? Does he look like a legitimate top 4 defenseman? Do you find a way to add Dylan Holloway to the mix? I think he looks like a legit third-line player, center or winger, on a contending style team. Jake Neighbours, I had questions this year. Is he a legitimate top 6 forward, or is that a little bit of good fortune last year, the way that we're seeing with Zach Hyman, who was a healthy scratch the other night for the Oilers? It's a difficult style to replicate year over year. Well, Neighbours looks good last night, ended up helping you win that game. I think the top line looks good. So you're adding these building blocks, and that to me was always the goal.
Well, and that's what a retool is, right? Like, you have to go through it and find the pieces that make sense for your roster, and you can slowly isolate those things. You're absolutely right. Like, the hard part for fans is you can't see a Snuggerud and Dvorsky, so you don't know what they're going to be. But you know that there's the potential for a top 6 winger and a top 6 centerman. And then from there, you build out the rest. What I questioned the most about this team for the past few years, and we asked so many national analysts this, was do the Blues have a top line? Because it doesn't matter how deep you are if you don't have a top line that can break the game wide open. Now, we'll talk about this a little bit later. I still think this Blues team is missing a game breaker.
It reminds me so much of the Cardinals, too,
yeah.
Where, like, other than that 2022 season, they didn't have the dude in the middle of the order that you really feared coming up in a big spot. That, to me, feels like where the Blues are at right now, where they've got some really nice pieces in the lineup, but do they have the guy that at any given time you fear the shot that comes off of his
Yeah, well, and I mean, we've come to Jordan because I know a lot of people are like, well, you're just bragging about how great Jordan Kyrou has been. Why isn't he then? We've comped Jordan Kyrou to Alex DeBrincat an awful lot. Alex DeBrincat was an incredible player, but you know when Alex DeBrincat was his best? When Patrick Kane was playing with the Chicago Blackhawks. No, there's your game breaker. So you're still looking for that, but you at least have a line that you throw out there, and every single time they jump over the boards, you know what to expect. They're predictable, and they can generate offense when you've got a number 1 center, when you've got guys who have top-line potential. Jake Neighbours is that depth for you. Part of the offense, and look, you are still struggling to score goals. You only scored 2 again last night. I think this team is averaging 2.2 goals per game on home ice, which is second worst in the NHL. You are missing a Philip Broberg, and whether you think he generates offense or not, he's had 2 games this season out of the 12 he played where he did not pick up a point, and one of those he was injured 10 minutes in. So you've got a guy who generates offense that's not playing. Robert Thomas is back in this lineup. He's getting more and more comfortable. You're at least putting things together right now that, again, who knows if this team is going to be a playoff, if they view it or not, but at least you're trending in the direction because guys are filling the voids that you thought were wide open.
The other guy that I would compare Jordan Kyrou to, and it's not a one-for-one, there is no one-for-one comparison for any player. They're all a little different, right? They're different types. No snowflakes are the same, right?
It's very sweet of you, man.
Carter Verhaeghe would be the other player that I would compare him to.
Oh, yeah.
Generally speaking. And the reason why is because Carter Verhaeghe, really good player, 40-goal scorer a couple of seasons ago, 34-goal scorer last year, consistent 70-plus point player. He's not the number 1 threat on that team. The number 1 threat on the Florida Panthers was, always will be Matthew Tkachuk. If you've got that guy that you can plop in on the top line as your go-to guy in any scenario, it changes everything about the rest of the lineup. It opens things up for everybody else. It allows Jordan Kyrou to potentially play on that second line, and now you can use him in specific matchups that open him up to get the best version of him. So a lot of this is big picture talk because I think, to me, that's where this Blues team is. I know they won last night. It was not a perfect game. You once again have a lead late in the 3rd period, and I don't know how you felt, Alex. I felt like it was inevitable that they were going to give up that goal that ties it.
When they didn't score that empty net goal, you just knew what was going to take place.
2.5 minutes was the final shift for those guys. It felt too long. I don't know what the coach can do there. Like, there was no stoppage, really. It's not an easy spot, but rough spot for them. They still they're missing out on opportunities to close these games out. And it's really frustrating to watch in the moment, but they do get the 2 points last night. That's ultimately what matters. And the guy that made it happen at the end was Jordan Binnington. Jake Neighbours had some thoughts on his goalie last night after he became tied for the winningest goalie in franchise history.
Yeah, I mean, he's the backbone of our team. We rely on him a lot. We put a lot of pressure on him, and, he handles it so well. He's a brick wall for us, a leader for us, which is rare for goalies, and just got such a presence in our room. So great game by him again tonight.
Neighbours nailed it. I mean, he is the backbone of your team. And Curbs and I went into a deep dive conversation about this last night on our post-game show. When you look at the Blues franchise, and it's so fitting that Jordan Binnington is now tied with Liut, and he will surpass him. Jamal Mayers was in our booth last night and said, it is wild to think that Jordan Binnington is going to be leading with 152 wins. But goalies do not last in St. Louis. You had Mike Liut from 79 to 85. For a small window there, you had Rick Wamsley and Greg Millen, and then Cujo took over until 95. Fuhr took over until 2000. And then from 2000 until 2018, I like to call that the clown car, because more and more kept coming out, and you're like, where the hell are these guys coming from? You went through one season I looked at last night, the 2002-2003 season. The Blues had 7 goaltenders. You went from Roman Turek to Chris Osgood to Brent Johnson to Manny Legacy to Patrick Lalime to Yarrow Halak to Elliott to Hutton to Allen to Miller. You have never had an established number one goaltender that every single season you don't even worry about. That's what Jordan Binnington is. And you're at 151 wins. He will surpass Mike Liut for the most wins in franchise history. And what I think is so fitting about this is it's going to continue to go up. You'll see a guy who's touching close to 200, 210, 215 by the end of his time in St. Louis. But as Neighbours said, for the last 3 years, you've been a rebuilding team that doesn't want to call yourself a rebuilding team. You know why you haven't gone into a full-blown rebuild? Because of Jordan Binnington. And people can deny that all you want. The .897 save percentage that he was a few years ago, any goaltender put in that position is going to be bad. But Jordan Binnington finds a way to keep you in games that you shouldn't be in, like last night against the San Jose Sharks, the third period. That could have been a 3-2 loss. But Binnington finds ways to do it, and that's what keeps teams from going into a 6, 7, 8-year rebuild and keeping it to a tighter number when you're trying to get back to a playoff team.
I also think, and we've had our spats about this, he's found what his leadership style is as well. I think he was searching for that. I think at times in the past it became too much where he was overly aggressive, he was overly animated, and I'm not sure that works in net. I think there are very few guys that can get away with that while also being leaders on their team.
Yeah.
And I believe caused some issues in the past. That has not been him over the last really year and a half. And this year, I go back to that moment where it was Perunovic and who was the other one? Was it Kessel, who gave up the goal? They had the bad turnover.
That was the Capitals game, wasn't it?
Yeah, he goes over to them and kind of pats them on the back and says, hey, guys, continue to be aggressive out there. We'll get it back. It's no biggie. I got you. And Perunovic talked about it after the game. Kessel talked about it after the game as well and said they needed that in that moment. It's a potential spot where they could lose confidence, and Perunovic ends up scoring a goal later in that game. I believe it was the turning point potentially, and we'll see what comes out of this. I believe it could have been the turning point in Scott Perunovic's career that Jordan Binnington went over and did that. Maybe it was always going to happen, and it's just an easy narrative to build, but he's had 2 goals since then. He looks like a different player since then. Jordan Binnington's a big part of that, man. So he is not only a guy that is the best goalie, I mean, now potentially in franchise history, he's also a guy that has found his way to lead this team through what is a retooling experience. And that's not an easy thing to do. So kudos to Jordan Binnington. Big moment for him last night. We'll certainly talk about that more as he eventually doesn't just tie, but breaks the record for most wins among goalies in franchise history. With Alex Ferrario, Jordan Deacon, I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. You guys can get involved in the show. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to do so. You can also check us out on YouTube. We're the Graveyard Chat. Very active this morning.
Oh, baby.
YouTube.com/101ESPN STL. In 15 minutes, we'll talk to Mike McKenna, the former NHL goalie. Want to get his thoughts on what was a cool moment last night for Jordan Binnington. We'll do that with McKenna coming up in about 15 minutes. But next, what did we learn about the Steelers last night and their loss against the Cleveland Browns? One of us on this show called that loss for them. What did it tell us about Pittsburgh? We'll tell you next here on 101 ESPN.
Your 101 mobile app, powered by the Schaefer Door Company.
Wall-to-wall Blues coverage is right here. 101 ESPN is live from the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light and E&B Granite. Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Ferrario and Jordan Deacon. I'm Brandon Kiley. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Big game last night in the NFL and the AFC North specifically. By the way, the best football aesthetic you'll ever see was last night in that game. Absolutely incredible to watch that on television and to not be in attendance for that specific game.
Too bad we won't be getting any snow in St. Louis. We never do.
Browns win 24-19 at home Thursday Night Football against the Steelers. The Steelers' Thursday Night Football lack of success against the divisional opponents continues. And Alex, I'm just going to open-ended ask this. Did we learn more about the Browns or the Steelers last night, in your opinion?
Steelers. I don't think we need to learn anything about the Browns. There's no coming back. I think if you learned anything from the Browns, it's Jameis Winston can do what Deshaun Watson's supposed to do for a lot less money. Browns, great. Probably should have saw that one coming if anybody bet on the Pittsburgh Steelers, which I almost did. But no, I learned everything I needed to know about the Pittsburgh Steelers. Their defense will keep them in games all season long. Their defense is the reason they sit at 8-3. Their defense is the reason a lot of people think that they can make a upset in the playoffs, which I don't even know if would be considered an upset if they're a top team. But they don't have an offense that I can sit there and look at and be like, that's a team that should be dangerous in the playoffs. I don't think they know who their quarterback is. Like Russell Wilson was good, and then he was bad, and then they went to Justin Fields, and then back to Russell Wilson. I learned everything I needed to know about the Pittsburgh Steelers, which I probably already knew, but, hey, they found ways to keep winning. Their defense is one of the best in the AFC and will be a reason that they are in playoff games or football games from now until the end of the season. Their offense is a joke, and they do not have a quarterback that should be relied upon to keep them in any football games.
I saw this one coming. Not to brag, but I'm 1-0 to start out.
It was your 1 point.
Our football pick'em challenge this week. That's the type of game the Steelers are supposed to dominate. Like, it's snowy. Nobody can do anything offensively for like the first 3 quarters of the game. It's a bunch of turnovers. Like, defense is really putting its stamp on the game. That's supposed to be Steelers football. And they couldn't find a way to win. Here's Bill Barnwell on Twitter. Teams that have lost the turnover battle by 2, failed to convert at least 2 third downs all game. The Browns last night were 1 for 10. Did not score a return touchdown and were outgained in the game. That combination, 0-67 over the last 30 years. And then last night, the Browns won. I don't know how the Steelers found a way to lose that game, but they found a way. I think that when you look at the way that their schedule sets up the rest of the way, man, I think the Steelers are a good team. I do think they have some elements of what they do, the deep passing game with Russell Wilson. You've got George Pickens, who when he's not trying to fight a Browns defender into the back of the end zone and eventually into the stands on the final play of the game, more interested in that than he was in catching the potential Hail Mary throw there. He's a really good player. A defense that is absolutely terrifying with T.J. Watt coming off of the edge. He was pretty insignificant last night, though. When you add up those elements, they could beat the Baltimore Ravens in the playoffs. They could beat my Kansas City Chiefs in the playoffs because those are specific things that give the Chiefs trouble. But if they lost to the Bengals, if they lost to the Eagles on the road, the Ravens on the road, the Chiefs at home, that wouldn't surprise me at all. That's 4 of their last 6 games, and they actually have 2 games against Cincinnati, so that's 5 of their last 6 games technically. If they went 2-4 down the stretch, I don't think anybody would be surprised. That's a 10-win football team, which is what we all thought the Steelers were coming into the season. They just happened to start with 8-2 as their record, which made everybody artificially think that they were better than they actually were. I think the Steelers are a good team. I still think they're like the 5th or 6th best team in the AFC. That's how I view them now.
I don't think they're better than the Ravens. And I know they just beat the Ravens, but you just beat the Ravens by kicking 6 field goals. I think the Ravens are still the better team. I do believe that the Steelers are probably going to walk away this season with about 11 wins because all of these games that are going to be difficult on their schedule by the end of the season, they'll stay in all of them because their defense keeps them in. I will not hear the argument that their defense has just been lucky this season. I think they are dangerous. But I will not invest any stock into what Russell Wilson has done over the last few weeks because that is just a Harry Houdini trick. It's like, where did this come from? And it's not going to be here very long. Their offense, we've made fun of the Indianapolis Colts this season because they play YOLO offense. That's what the Steelers are doing.
100%.
They're playing YOLO offense because Russell Wilson is going to heave it downfield, and George Pickens is probably going to come up with some type of catch.
The 50-50 balls have gone their way so far. Last night, they didn't as much. Some of that is certainly because of the weather. Like, that's a really tough spot. To be fair, some of what the Browns struggled to do offensively was also because of the weather, but I digress. Their offense is very much, hey, did the 50-50 balls go our way? If so, we win. If not, we lose. And that's it. So I think they're just a very volatile offense. And when things are going their way, they can score 30. And when they're not, they're going to score 17. I just think there's a much better floor on teams like the Buffalo Bills and the Baltimore Ravens. And even to a degree, a team like the Chargers, I think, is a more stable floor than what we've seen so far this year from the Pittsburgh Steelers. All right, the other thing that I wanted to get to, there is some news in the NFL this morning. We talked about the Daniel Jones news over the last couple of days. Daniel Jones has officially been released by the New York Giants. Apparently, he went to the owner yesterday and said, hey, I would like you guys to go ahead and let me go. I'm playing scout team safety right now. This is not good for anybody
That's
involved.
an expensive position.
For us to go like this the rest of the way. So he's going to clear waivers. Nobody's going to pick up the remainder of his contracts, but then he'll be free to sign with whomever he wants to. Alex, to me, this has Dallas Cowboys written all over it. Not for the future, but
is that because they play the Giants this Thanksgiving in football?
Absolutely.
Okay, that makes sense.
Dak is out the rest of the year with the hamstring that's been torn off the bone. They've got Cooper Rush. He had a really good game last week against Houston, and that amounted to exactly 10 points against Houston. Daniel Jones is better than Cooper Rush, man. And if you're them and you want to stabilize things and just not have things completely go off the rails the rest of the way, you've got some winnable games here. You got the Giants, you've got Carolina. Cincy's defense is terrible. Tampa's defense is terrible. You can put up some good points. You've got a guy in CeeDee Lamb that is a legitimate #1 target. If I'm the Cowboys, I'm making the call and saying, hey, come sign with us. It's $1 million the rest of the way. Recoup some of your value. Hit the market again in the offseason. That's, to me, the team that, if I'm him, I would want to sign with. If I'm them, I've got the need. What would you do if you're Daniel Jones the rest of the year?
I think it comes down to two teams. It comes down to the Cowboys and Titans, and they're two different reasons. One is the Cowboys you just mentioned. If I'm Daniel Jones, I want to set my market for this offseason to prove that, look, that was just a bad team that I was a part of, and I'm a better quarterback. You know how you do that? You go to CeeDee Lamb. And you find a way to have CeeDee Lamb, you put your numbers up a little bit higher, and then people are like, oh, maybe there is something there with Daniel Jones. The reason that I would consider the Titans if I'm him is because the Titans are done with the Will Levis experience. They don't have a quarterback. They're bad, but if I'm Daniel Jones and I can go there and make that team at least competitive for the final few games of the regular season, maybe I get a job next year once again.
So you're saying maybe this is more of a long-term play with the Titans as opposed to the Cowboys, which is very clearly just the rest of this season.
Because if I go to the Titans and I'm good for, let's say, 5 games this season, the Titans might look at, you know what, let's go one-year deal. Let's go a one-year deal with a Daniel Jones like we saw with Sam Darnold where he gets a shot with the Minnesota Vikings, and let's see what you look like. And then you got to capitalize it on if you're Daniel. But if you just go take any job out there that's not going to put you in a position to succeed, you're not going to have any success. And you need to find a way to make some money and get another job as a quarterback.
I've had my fun with Daniel Jones. I don't think he's a very good quarterback. I think he's better than Gardner Minshew.
Oh, yeah.
I think he can be the equivalent to Derek Carr. I think he can be a starter for somebody next year. I think he will likely be a starter for somebody next year. I think his new role is going to be what we have seen now Gardner Minshew has become. Go in, be the starter for a team that is likely to draft a quarterback. And if you can stave them off for 6 weeks, great. Jacoby Brissett has been in this role in his career as well. You can make a really good living doing this, man. You make $5 million a year, $10 million a year to be the guy that kind of is the placeholder. And maybe eventually, Daniel Jones is like 25 years old. Maybe eventually somebody decides, you know what, this is our guy long term. We're going to go ahead and invest in it. Jameis Winston might be getting that opportunity right now with the Browns. He's like 8 years into his career, and finally it might stick with him in Cleveland. some of these guys eventually make it work. Gino, one of those guys who, hey, got an opportunity elsewhere like 10 years after he was drafted, and it's stuck, and now he's making $25 million a year. There's still a potential out there for Daniel Jones to be that guy. He was just never going to live up to the contract. I always was confused by the way that the Giants approached him, the way that Miami has approached Tua Tagovailoa. It's almost as if these teams are wish casting, and they're like, hey, if we pay him to be the guy, he will suddenly become the guy. No, it's not how this works. Pay them for what you're expecting them to be. Don't artificially make it something that it's not. All right, coming up in 15 minutes, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. We'll get into Ask Us Anything. If you guys have any questions, sports or otherwise, we'll get into that coming up in 15 minutes. But next, we've got some questions for Mike McKenna, the former NHL goalie. He joins us each and every week on BK and Ferrario. He does so next year on 101 ESPN.
101 ESPN Sports Center.
I'm Jordan Deacon. This Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Last night, the Blues welcomed in the San Jose Sharks and came away with a 3-2 shootout win. Jordan Binnington has officially tied his agent, Mike Liut, for most wins as a goalie in Blues history. They're back in action tomorrow night right here on 101 ESPN, taking on the New York Islanders. Pre-game coverage starts at 5:30, and then puck drop is at 6:30. But before the Blues game, we've got some college football action for you starting at 10:30. That game will be Ole Miss versus Florida, and then on Sunday, NFL action begins at 11 for the Colts versus Lions pregame. The Broncos and Raiders matchup will follow, and then we'll wrap up the NFL triple header with the Rams versus the Eagles. I'm Jordan Deacon. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
More Blues talk, more often. 101 ESPN is live from the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light and E&B Granite. Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Happy to be joined here on BK and Ferrario by Mike McKenna. He's the former NHL goalie. He joins us via the Callier and Thompson hotline on behalf of Macadoodles. We'll talk to him about how the first week has gone for Macadoodles here in just a little bit. But Mike, appreciate the time as always, man. Let's get started with the big news from last night. Jordan Binnington officially tied now as the winningest goalie in the history of the St. Louis Blues franchise. What was your reaction last night when you saw him earn that achievement?
Well, I thought about it from a perspective of it being in a really cool way. He got to make the final save on Eklund in the shootout to win it for the Blues. And as a goaltender, there's kind of, sometimes you got a rocking chair game where you just sit back and the win comes to you. But Binnington played a big role last night. And to put an exclamation point on it with that last save in a shootout, it's just cool, man. It kind of gives you a little bit more gravity to what that was. And it's amazing to me, guys, to think that, you know, Binnington burst onto the scene just now, a little over 5 years ago, really almost 5 years ago. And here he is now climbing the ladder for the St. Louis Blues. It's amazing, but it also is kind of surprising that there just hasn't been the longevity in net with the Blues like there has, like a Marty Brodeur with the Devils or, Patrick Waugh with either the Avalanche or the Canadiens. It just shows you how volatile the goaltending position is, which the suitcase tattoo on my leg can also attribute itself to you.
Well, and that's what we were talking about last night on postgame, Mike. I mean, somebody who grew up in St. Louis, somebody who grew up a St. Louis Blues fan, you remember all of those late 90s, early 2000s teams to where there were 5, 6, 7 different goaltenders that were playing for St. Louis. It says something that the Blues have had a stable face in net, which I don't think a lot of teams in the NHL have that ability to say.
Yeah, and I don't know if people – I think people do realize it. I do in this city. I really do. When you go to a game and you see the number of Binnington jerseys there, it's not surprising. But I will say this, never take somebody for granted. These last couple of years for the Blues have been lean. They haven't been the same as the 2019 Cup run. And Binnington has overplayed and outplayed the team in front of him to not a whole lot of fanfare often, And what I think's really been cool about the arc of his career is that he's had some really good goalie partners. He's also been on an island at times. Having Jake Allen as his goalie partner early was probably one of the greatest things that could ever happen for Jordan Binnington. You couldn't have a better goalie partner. And now the combination of having Joel Hofer alongside Binnington, it couldn't be any better for a situation for the Blues. And, I can guarantee Binnington's taking what he learned with Allen and with others to what he's doing with Joel Hofer and feeding off one another, which is really good because it puts the Blues in a great spot with whoever's in net.
We're talking to Mike McKenna. He is a former NHL goalie in his own right, joins us each and every Friday here on BK and Ferrario. Mike, I'm curious, as you look kind of big picture at the Blues, they have not won a game in regulation in their last 8. That being said, they do have at least a point in 3 of their last 5. So there's the glass half full versus the glass half empty. How do you view what we're seeing out of the Blues right now, especially over the last week?
Well, I think having Robert Thomas back in the lineup goes without saying that the Blues are an improved team. And, have they gotten more out of Jordan Kyrou that way? Yes. Has Pavel Buchnevich looked more like himself playing on the wing? I believe that as well. Having that top line back together. It's also shown that the Blues are still just very much in flux when it comes to that middle six. So in terms of results, sure, you want to win more games. You want to have runaway games. The Blues have played more close games than anybody in the NHL this season. Last I counted on it, 1-goal games. And for a team that's been, I don't think rebuilding is the right word, but definitely retooling, being in the mix, they're still in the mix here, guys. It's not a foregone conclusion that playoffs won't happen here. They could happen. I think you're just seeing a team that's going through what everybody does as they get older with more experience. But I do like now that you've got a top line, again, that's pretty well defined. You've got a fourth line for this team, guys, that to me is really well defined. Torpchenko, Walker, Fox, there's a reason why they started the game last night. And look what happened, right?
Yep.
It's just that middle. Where's it all going to shake out? So I like where the team's at. I don't like the results as much. But as a player, knowing that the Blues have been in almost every game this year means more to me because they haven't been all over the place with crazy results. I'd be concerned if they were getting blown out of games and then coming back the next night and winning on a regular basis.
Mike, in your opinion, what's that middle six missing right now?
Realistically, you're just missing some top end. And I think you're really missing somebody grabbing that number 2 centerman role. And, is it going to be Dylan Holloway? Can he play there? Does Bolduc grab a center ice role? It doesn't seem likely at this point. I think that's really it. You need something more down the middle to really make it go. It's just skill level not quite there. And we've said this time and again that all the draft picks that are going to come through are going to be there eventually. It's the same hole that was there at the start of the season. I still like Braden Shen on the wing, right? But he's a great player wherever he is. I just don't know if he's your second-line centerman. So, to me, I think they need a bit of help there, a little bit more of a pivot on it. But at least this way, I'd like the depth at least on the power play. It's looked better. It's moved the puck quicker. And a lot of that's just really due to having Robert Thomas back in the lineup.
Mike, I got to ask you the question that is a bit uncomfortable right now because the Blues have a head coach, but it's been a national storyline. And Jim Montgomery was fired by the Boston Bruins a couple of days ago. There's the obvious ties to the Blues organization. He was here. He knows Doug Armstrong well. He has the best points percentage in the NHL over the last 3 seasons, and now he's suddenly available as a coaching free agent. I don't necessarily want to ask you about, hey, should the Blues do this? Should they go hire Jim Montgomery and make him their next head coach? But I am curious, if you're in the spot of a general manager, ownership, and something like this becomes available, how do you evaluate where you're at with your own head coach when we've barely seen what Bannister has to offer here?
This is such a unique situation, guys. And I actually I feel bad for Drew Bannister because he's not going to be able to run from this. Sure. And I think he's done a good job so far. I think he's come in and stabilized and given the team some purpose and some structure. The Blues play pretty heavy most nights. The Blues play pretty detailed most nights. Are there gaps or do they turn the puck over too often? Yeah, it happens. But they've been better structurally with Bannister. That's why the games have been close. So how can you avoid this question, though, when Jim Montgomery has put up consistent winning at every single level he's been? This is what Doug Armstrong must struggle with. There's a free agent coach available right now that his proven track record is better than his current head coach, but his current head coach hasn't had the chance to really prove that. And I feel for everybody involved in this, man, because Bannister's got to be watching over his shoulder, it would feel like, even though I'm sure he's focused on the task at hand. But it reminds me of, ironically, another Bruins firing. Remember when the Bruins fired Claude Julien? This was back in 2017. And Montreal hired him, right away, if I remember my timing on this properly. It was he's become available, we must hire him. And it was a shocking play. That's what this feels like in some way. I don't know if that's ever going to play out, but it's a similar situation where somebody's going to hire Jim Montgomery. do you miss out on hiring Jim Montgomery? I think that's how it's going to be viewed around the league. And I don't think it's just the Blues here, guys. And I don't think the Blues have as much reason to be concerned. Somebody else that's in a higher position with better players that's underperforming as a team, they're going to grab Jim Montgomery before the Blues will, because there's way more to go for St. Louis before this is all said and done this year and in the development of the players.
Alex, to his point, he remembers it correctly. February 7th, 2017, Julian was fired by the Boston Bruins. February 14th, 2017, exactly 1 week later, named the head coach of the Montreal Canadiens after they fired their head coach. This has happened before. It's interesting. I did not realize that had happened that recently, Mike. That's a good corollary there.
And Mike, you're echoing what BK and I said a couple of days ago, because this is such a tough spot for Drew Bannister to be in, because when he was hired, the conversation was, look, we're a retooling team and we need to approach this so our younger players get better. And then once that Broberg offer sheet took place, it felt like the mindset shifted to where it's not just a retool anymore, it's the competitive window is opening.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And let's not forget here, man, Drew Bannister's got something to prove, which is awesome, right? Like, this is a guy who can make a name for himself and take a group of players that skill level, the Blues are in the, they're right at the probably 2/3 mark of the league skill-wise, bottom. They're not in the bottom, but they're 16 to 20 or so. If he can make them a playoff team, man, he's a hot commodity, So I just feel for the guy, because you can't dodge these questions, and it's not anything of his own making. It's not like the Blues have lost 4 in a row or 8 in a row, or like, they've been good. It's just the fact that there's a free agent on the market that's going to have everybody. It's going to raise eyebrows. Like, I guarantee Jim Montgomery's hired by the end of the season. Like, I'd put a big old Billy guarantee on that right away, guys. I would.
It makes sense. We've been saying the same thing, and then it just becomes a question. There's a million different angles to this, but the big question for the Blues is it worth it for you to do that now when you are potentially still in the midst of a retool? And we've just seen, like, coaches in the NHL, it's every 2 years are seemingly getting recycled right now, which is another conversation for another day. Hey, Mike, appreciate the time as always. You're joining us as you do each and every week on behalf of Macadoodles. You guys had your grand opening last week. I was on my way to Kansas City, so I wasn't able to make it out there then, but I'm hoping to get out there at some point, maybe this weekend. What do you guys have going on right now over at Macadoodles?
Well, I got to tell you, last weekend was amazing, and thank you for all your help. We had you couldn't even move on Friday. It was amazing when we dropped it, and it had a lot to do with the Clydesdale being out front. But you know what? What's cool? I just got in a whole bunch of new bourbons. I got in some 13th Colony. I got in some Lucky 7. I got some George Remus. I got some Joseph Magnus. Man, I've been trying to fill the shelves with all the bourbons that you can't find everywhere else in town. And yes, that will come with some allocated. And we're going to be running some stuff out next week and some big specials in advance of Thanksgiving, Black Friday as well. We're going to be running big-time specials on. So we're looking forward to that. And over in our wine room, we just had Nouveau Beaujolais Day yesterday. So come get some of that fresh wine from France. It's sitting out on the shelves. Come try it with Kat in the wine room. We are ready for you here. Brian and Feisey Road in Dardenne Prairie open 9 to 10. We're open until 10 tonight, guys, out here in Dardenne Prairie. So come and see us.
Sounding all fancy with this French wine here, Mike. You're going to have to make me make a date night to get out to Macadoodles.
Well, I'm just trying to impress. If Marty Brodeur's ever listened, I'm trying to brush up on my French just to impress him. That's all I'm doing.
Nailed it. He would tell you, nailed it.
Yeah, they've got the samplings out there. It's a great way to start the night for you, Alex.
Hey, I'm going to tell my wife we got a plan for Friday night.
It's a place to come, man. We'll do tastings all night. You can go out afterwards, have a great meal. We'll be here for you.
Beautiful. Love it. Hey, Mike, appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much as always. Enjoy the weekend. We'll talk with you again next Friday.
Sounds great. Thanks, fellas. Thanks, everybody. Have a good weekend.
See you, Mike.
It's Mike McKenna. Appreciate his time as always here on BK and Ferrario. If you guys are going to be drinking next week for the holiday, certainly check out Macadoodles. You can check them out online as well. Got a website. They've got a Facebook page as well showing some of their specials that they've got going on. So highly recommend checking them out. Appreciate Mike, as always, for joining us here on BK and Ferrari. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. YouTube chat is available for you at youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. Coming up next, we'll get to Ask Us Anything, sports or otherwise. Get your questions in now. We'll answer them next here on 101 ESPN.
to more exclusive Blues talk. 101 ESPN is live from the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light and E&B Granite. Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. You've got questions. We may have the answers. Maybe. It's BK and Ferrario's questions and answers on 101 ESPN.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Ask Us Anything. If you guys have any questions, sports or otherwise, get them in on the Air Comfort Service text line right now. We'll also take some questions from the YouTube chat, youtube.com/101ESPN STL. All right, let's get to some of these. Let's start with this from the 314, Alex. Do you think that Christmas cards are overrated, or do you like the idea of getting a Christmas card?
Turn my mic on first. I think Christmas cards are overrated. I think cards are overrated. My wife feels differently. She sends Christmas cards out every year, mostly because before we had kids, we didn't send Christmas cards. When you've got kids, it's an opportunity to brag about your family, so you send them out. I think Christmas cards are overrated because they sit up top for, a month, and then they get thrown away? Yep. I don't buy birthday cards. This might not surprise a lot of people. I don't buy birthday cards for my wife, my family, because I think they're a joke. I think you open them, I think you read the sweet message, and then I think a week later you throw them away.
I've arrived there with wedding cards as well.
Oh, yeah.
Listen,
I don't care.
This may sound hokey, especially to people that are older than us. I'm just going to Venmo you.
Yeah.
It's just easier for everybody involved. Take this money and do with it whatever you'd like. If you'd like to use it for dinner the next night, great. If you want to use this towards your vacation fund, awesome. If you want to throw this, or if you already have kids, right? Like, you want to buy your kids something nice, great. Use it for if you just want to help repay for your wedding with the debt that you've just accumulated, awesome.
Yep.
It's all you, man. Do with it whatever you'd like. But I've arrived there. We went to that wedding last weekend. I just Venmo'd them. Put the money in their account. Good to go.
Now
because cards are like $7.
Well, that's the thing. And I don't want to sound like a cold-hearted individual. Like, if my daughters give me a card, I'm going to love that. But that's a handmade card that they make themselves. I think paying $7 for a card for you to write, I love you, happy birthday, or happy anniversary, I think that's a waste of your money. Send me a text. It's the same effect.
Somebody on the text line said, guys, I have every card that my wife has given me for the last 28 years that we've been together. I don't have a card for anybody else, though. That
awesome.
That is something that is really special between you and your wife. And that's a little different to me. If you're doing something like that, that's between the two of you, it's totally cool. I don't diminish anybody else for doing it, but I send pictures to my mom and we send pictures to Kara's family all the time of Luca. I don't feel the need to send a Christmas card to them. We have a digital frame that we got for my mom for Christmas last year, and we got the same thing for Kara's mom as well. And so we upload pictures to their frames from here, and that's our Christmas card, quote unquote, right? We just always are monthly uploading new pictures of our little guys. So that's the way we handle it. If anybody else handles it differently, totally cool and no problem. But that's how we kind of look at it. All right, from the 314. Guys, how would you stack the St. Louis sports teams right now and rate them based on their current team, outlook, leadership, and appeal to fans?
Ooh.
So if we're just doing Blues, City, Battlehawks, and Cardinals, I would say at the top of the list right now for all of those different things, crazy as it may seem, is probably the Battlehawks. They've just got the highest approval rating. They also get the least amount of criticism because
it's the Battlehawks.
It's a little different.
Also a team that doesn't have a quarterback right now, but it's fine.
I would probably go Blues second in terms of just fan outlook for the organization and belief that it's going to get better, and then probably City and then Cardinals. And I think some of that also has to do with which teams get the most discussion, which teams have the most passion behind them, but it's another discussion.
Yeah, I'm probably with you. I would probably put the Battlehawks third. I would do Blues first, Cardinals second, Battlehawks, then City. Mostly because I think with the Battlehawks, when they're there, great. When not, you don't really hear a lot of people talking about what's going to happen with the team. It's kind of they're here and it's great. I think City's in a spot that a lot of people just don't know what direction they're going. And at least for the Cardinals and Blues, you have a direction. They're pointing you one way, and then it comes down to trust. And I think a lot more people, although you never know with how the Blues are playing right now. I think a lot more people trust Doug Armstrong in the direction than the Cardinals in their direction.
Yeah, it's a tough time right now for St. Louis sports, to put it.
It's all gonna
lightly.
get better.
All right, we'll go through a few more of these quick hitter style from the 314. Guys, this is for BK. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think that Anthony Richardson could take the Colts to the playoffs this year? I'm a Colts fan, so I definitely do. It's going to be tough. Getting in, given how their season has gone thus far, is an uphill battle. I would say no. I do not think that he can get them in this year. I just think the Broncos are a better team. I will have to check out their schedule, though, to see what's remaining the rest of the way. Colts schedule. Ooh, Detroit. They've got that game head-to-head against Denver. That may ultimately determine it because the rest of it's pretty light. At New England, Tennessee at home, Giants on the road, Jacksonville at home. If they win that Broncos game, I think they can get it. But they've got to win that Broncos game, and that's not going to be easy considering it's on the road and the Broncos have a really good defense. So I would bet against them, but maybe not as impossible as I made it out to be.
I still think they're missing some pieces. I still think they're missing a couple of elements on the offensive side. I think Anthony Richardson, if they've cleared the air of what took place a couple of weeks ago, I think he's the guy that can eventually get them to the playoffs. I don't think that's going to happen this year because I still think they're in a little bit of flux of who they are as a team.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. The YouTube chat is available for you guys right now at youtube.com/101ESPNSTL. In 15 minutes, we're going to talk about the Blues and their struggles to close games out. Why is this continuing to happen? We'll talk about that coming up here in just a little bit. But next, there is a player, Alex, that has been the discussion of much critique for the St. Louis Cardinals who might be done with his new home as well, sooner than expected. We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN.
Wall-to-wall Blues coverage is right here. 101 ESPN is live from the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light and E&B Granite. Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Brandon Kiley, you've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Coming up here in just a little bit, let you hear what Keith Law had to say about why he voted Ollie Marmol as the third best National League manager. So be sure to stay tuned for that. But Alex, there's some speculation that a former St. Louis Cardinal might not be long for his new team.
Tyler O'Neill?
Dylan,
available?
Well, he is actually available via free agency. We'll see where he ends up going. But Dylan Carlson was the topic of discussion briefly when he ended up in Tampa Bay because he got off to such a hot start. Well, his final numbers in Tampa Bay the rest of the way in 37 games, he was a .219 hitter with a on-base percentage below 300 and an OPS plus that was 22% below league average offensively. In other words, almost exactly what he did for the St. Louis Cardinals in 2023. The same exact numbers for the most part is what he did in Tampa Bay. So there's speculation that he might be a non-tender candidate because he's projected to make about $3 million in arbitration. Today is officially the day where teams have to decide, are we tendering them a deal, guaranteeing them some kind of a contract next year, or non-tendering them and allowing them to add their names to the free agent pool? Many are speculating that Carlson is going to be a part of that, a non-tender candidate for the Rays. Alex, in your opinion, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for anybody else that wants to get involved. Would that change the way that we discuss the Dylan Carlson trade and the lack of return that they were able to get for him if he ends up being non-tendered despite his multiple years of club control that remain?
Because it was a wash. The trade that you acquired, which was the bullpen arm, which why am I blanking on his name? Armstrong, thank you. He was DFA'd because it didn't work out. And Dylan Carlson, now he wasn't DFA'd, but it didn't work out to the point that the Tampa Bay Rays, who are trying to save money in every area, say, nope, not worth the decision to keep a Dylan Carlson right now. So it works in the Cardinals' favor because the narrative is always, well, a guy that gets traded didn't get a shot, and he's going to go on to have success. It's followed the Cardinals since Randy Arozarena, and every time a player moves on, it's up, well, there goes that guy. Cardinals lose again. And I think this backs up what we were saying about Dylan Carlson. Like, this isn't a scenario where he didn't get a shot and he's still young. This was a guy that just was not going to hit what the threshold was for him in St. Louis. And I if anything, I think it gives a little gratification to John Mozeliak and company to where it's like, look, this was a guy that we thought was going to be great. It didn't work out. That's how it goes sometimes when it comes to Cardinals prospects.
Dylan Carlson was never Randy Arozarena. He was never Adolis Garcia. Hell, he was never even Tyler O'Neill. Like, Tyler O'Neill at least showed you legit MVP caliber upside. Dylan Carlson didn't hit the ball hard. He was a guy that, when he first reached the big leagues, I was like, okay, there's some upside here defensively. But by the time he was done in St. Louis, he wasn't even playing well defensively in the outfield. He added very little at that point on the base paths. I think the injuries have just taken their toll. Now, it would not surprise me at all if in the next couple of years, at some point we see Carlson reemerge as a legitimate starter for somebody across the big leagues. I don't think that time is right now because we'll see how long it takes for him to actually fully get himself right just when it comes to health. But Dylan Carlson wasn't in the same category as so many of these other players. I will mention, just because today is the non-tender deadline, the one guy that the Cardinals have that could be a candidate for that is the left-handed pitcher that they ended up getting. Why am I blanking on his name right now? John King, via the trade a couple of years ago in the Jordan Montgomery deal. I think they should tender him a contract. I think he's worth a couple $1 million. He's a more than adequate left-handed reliever coming out of the pen. I'd be fine with him coming back. I'm not going to throw a fit tonight if they decide not to tender him a deal. Kind of be similar to me to last year with Andrew Kisner, where it's like, I don't totally get this, but if you're making like Steven Matz a reliever, if you got Libby coming out of the pen next year as well, you've got JoJo Romero, that is a lot of left-handed relievers that you're potentially building around. So I get it if you end up going a little cheaper there. I am interested in some of the other potential non-tender
I was just kind of looking
candidates.
at some of these names.
So this, to me, is the pool of players that the Cardinals should be looking at in free agency this year. They're not going to go sign like Jock Peterson or anything like that. But some of these guys are potential like 13th position player types. Like Austin Hayes, former outfielder with the Baltimore Orioles. Eventually this year was traded at the deadline to Philadelphia. He was an all-star in 2023 for Baltimore. He's been above league average offensively as a hitter the last 4 seasons. He's right-handed, which is something that the Cardinals really crave. They don't have a lot of those, especially in the outfield. And he absolutely crushes left-handed pitching. This past season, he had an OPS over 900 against lefties. That's exactly the kind of guy that I would want to bring in here. Austin Hayes, 29 years old, going to be cheap. That's somebody that I'd be curious about. Another guy in a very similar vein is Ramon Laureano. Previously with the Oakland Athletics, spent a little bit of time with Cleveland. This year was traded to Atlanta at the deadline as well. Again, right-handed hitter, does really well against lefties. These are just like cast-offs from their former teams that when they potentially get non-tendered tonight, they're the kind of guys that next week will probably spend a 5-minute segment talking about hey, this guy's interesting for the Cardinals.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking just since you went down the outfield path, like a Brian De La Cruz. It's a right-handed outfielder who
Same idea.
Hits hard, so you go on that front. I would be looking at the pitching side of things as well. If there's one thing I know about this Cardinals team, they love finding relievers or starting pitchers, but relievers for cheap. We talked about the Rule 5 draft, how they've accomplished that in the past. I would look at the non-tendered guys and find, is there somebody that matches the identity of our bullpen to where you just throw another arm, kind of like what Keenan Middleton was, to where, hey, somebody who could be high leverage if we need him to, but for right now, you throw him into the middle of the bullpen and find out if we're going to be going by committee. I'd be looking heavily at some of these pitching side of things, and it really just comes down to who gets non-tendered and who gets picked up.
An example of that, like somebody that fits the criteria you're talking about. So at the deadline, the Royals traded for Hunter Harvey, right-handed reliever, 29 years old, former big-time prospect, has a big-time strikeout rate, does not walk very many people, was not super effective for the Royals, and then ended up getting hurt down the stretch as well. So I don't know where he's at health-wise, but if the Royals decide to non-tender him this offseason, he's the kind of guy that I would say, hey, come in, make $2 million for us next year. Rehab until you're fully healthy, and then we'll see what you've got down the stretch. But those are the kinds of pitchers that could potentially be available. I'm totally with you. Take a shot on 3 of them, see where it all shakes out, and if you have to DFA him, you DFA him going into next season.
Like that Mark Leiter, right-handed pitcher who was with the Yankees at the end of the season. Like you go get a 27-year or 33-year-old pitcher, and you just say middle of the bullpen. We'll use you in a certain spot, and if it doesn't work out, oh well, see you next time.
All right. The other thing that I wanted to get to Cardinals-wise, we talked the other day about Keith Law, who decided, you know what, I'm going to go rogue here. National League Manager of the Year vote. For my third place vote, I'm going Ollie Marmol.
Love it.
We all looked at it and we genuinely wondered, like, did he make a mistake? Did he accidentally hit the wrong manager on the drop-down bar because Mendoza and Marmol would be right next to one another on the list? Did he accidentally hit Ollie Marmol's name? Well, Keith Law, we reached out to him earlier this week. He said, I'm busy. Buddy, a time for the guys on foul territory.
Sure.
So, cool. Here's what Keith Law had to say on his vote for Ollie Marmol and why he viewed him as the third best manager in the National League.
Marmol, why'd you pick him?
Okay, can I just point out, it is a third place vote.
Don't care. Don't care. Scott said you should lose your voting rights forever.
Everybody needs to go touch grass a little bit here.
Oh.
It's funny because Cardinal fans think he's terrible. And I'm like, his 2 best players, offensive players coming into the year, collapsed. And I thought he handled the bullpen extremely well. I think he deserves a good bit of credit for sticking with Mason Wynn early for his development over the course of the year, which was supposed to be Marmol's thing, right? You're supposed to be a development guy. And look, I don't think the whole Pythagorean record, that's not just straight up how you measure a manager. It's not nothing that they had a winning record despite getting outscored by like 40 runs on the season. Like, I'm willing to move the needle a little bit for that. I came down to him or Carlos Mendoza. Those were the 2 candidates. I don't think either was, like, if you said, it should have been Mendoza over Marmol, sure. I got no real argument there.
So he never really confirmed that he didn't click on the wrong name. Because it was him or Mendoza, and I think he was just trying to defend the name that he selected in that spot.
Yeah, he viewed it the way that we said. Hey, Ollie outperformed expectations this year. The 2 best players on the team didn't hit. His starting pitching was fine, but not great. Did a good job with the bullpen. Outperformed the expected win-loss record. Boom, third best manager in the National League. I'm fine with that. I wouldn't have voted for Ollie as a top 3 manager in the NL this year just because, like, I think you got to be a little better than 83 wins to be able to get there for me. I would have voted for Mendoza, but I'm fine with it. I don't think it was as ridiculous as what a lot of people are making it out to be. I think it speaks more to the, like, there weren't a ton of great options in the National League.
I think what
this year.
Keith Law said at the beginning is the most important thing. It's a third-place vote.
100%.
Are we really discussing a third-place vote? It was a runaway for Pat Murphy. Everything else doesn't matter for the third-place vote.
Also, the entire premise of, like, these Coach of the Year, Manager of the Year, all it is, hey, who did we think was going to be bad? That ended up being good. Let's go ahead and credit the manager or the coach for that. It's got to be they're the ones clearly that made this happen. Like, was Pat Murphy actually the best manager in the National League this year? I think he did a really good job. The best manager was probably Dave Roberts.
Yeah, or Mike Schilt.
Dave Roberts won 98 games with a team that had no pitching for like 70% of the season. That's a pretty damn good managerial job, and then he ended up winning the World Series in the postseason. I know these votes are put in prior to the postseason. That does not count, but like Dave Roberts was probably the best manager in the National League this year. But they had expectations of winning 100 games, and they fell short of that, so it clearly wasn't Dave Roberts. So the whole idea of Manager of the Year, Coach of the Year, it's all
of these votes are just kind of a joke in itself. I mean, I complain about the best defenseman in the National Hockey League. Like, other than the MVPs, which even in some sports like the NFL where it has to be a quarterback, some of these just votes for these awards are kind of a joke these days.
Of course. It's always been that way. It just feels more that way right now because we have more information.
And I can yell about it on the radio.
100%. All right, coming up in 15 minutes, we're going to dive into some NFL quick hitters. But next, why are the Blues struggling to close these games out? Alex is going to have to explain this to me because it seems like it happens every other game. We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Blues talk more often. 101 ESPN is live from the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light and E&B Granite. Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Have a closing out game issue right now. With Alex Ferrario, I'm Brandon.
You're Tanner Hendrickson?
Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Knew it was going to happen.
That's Grant Francis back in the studio. Sorry, Jordan.
I think last night might have been the worst. Got 9 seconds left in the game, and you give up the game-tying goal. Now, you end up getting 2 points out of it, so all's well that ends well.
You knew it was coming, though.
But you could feel that coming. The last 2.5 minutes, you had the same guys on the ice. It's just not a good situation for the Blues, and this has become a theme. That Philadelphia game, Alex, they were tied 1-1. Give up a goal with 3 minutes to go. Jordan Kyrou, we all know, end up losing that game 2-1. That's a -2 in terms of the points, at least -1 to be able to get to overtime. Utah tied 2-2, give up a goal with 3 minutes left, end up losing that one 4-2 because of the empty netter later on, but that's a potential point there as well. Boston tied 2-2, give up a goal with 1:47 remaining. You end up losing that one 3-2. There's 3 points already at a minimum of going to overtime that you've given up. The Sabres, you're up 3-3, give up a goal with about 7 minutes left. You end up losing that one 4-3 in overtime. That's a little different, 7 minutes to go as opposed to in the final 3 minutes of the game. The Minnesota Wild, same thing. You end up being tied 2-2 with about 6 minutes to go. They go up 3-2 and then have an empty netter with about a minute and a half left as well. They win that one 4-2. And then you've got last night with the Sharks, where you're up 2-1, potentially get the 2 points in regulation. You push the Sharks even further down in the standings. They get that last goal with 10 seconds left. They end up tying it 2-2. Alex, what's going on? Why is this happening? This has happened now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different times for the St. Louis Blues, and you don't have to go back that far. This is since October 31st.
Yeah.
In 6 weeks, it's happened 6 different times. Why?
Why is they're just not making the right decisions? I mean, think about that, what you just mentioned. There was those 6 games that 4 of them, if I'm not mistaken, you did not get to overtime. Minnesota, Utah, Boston, and Philly. Yep. 4 points would put you at 23, which would put you 1 point behind the Dallas Stars right now for 3rd place in the Central Division. So, that's the context of where you're at right now as a team, those little bounces. I think each one of those games you have to explain differently. Philadelphia and Utah, you know exactly what took place. There was a guy on the ice that was trying to win the hockey game. Jordan Kyrou was trying to win the game for his team. I can't fault him for it because that's what he does. He's a guy that goes out there to win hockey games. But you have to understand the circumstances where you're at. You got to get that game to overtime. Shen was talking to Joey yesterday before the game, and he was telling Joey, look, we're right there. You look at these games, one decision leads us to overtime, and you're seeing a Blues team that is now 4-1 overtime. But sometimes guys get greedy. Sometimes guys want to get there. The Minnesota Wild game was just a symptom of you not getting the puck out of your zone. You had 3 opportunities to get the puck out, and you just whiffed on it. The Boston game, that's the one that's probably the most frustrating because you just got too sheltered. Excuse me. You got too...
I get it, man. It gets me emotional.
I know, very emotional these days. You got to the point where you said, we can't lose this game. And so what'd you do? You went into a shell, and you was like, well, nobody can get to our goaltender. We're going to hold the puck on the outside and just force you guys to beat us that way. But then what happens is David Pastrnak gets an elite shot. And then, of course, last night was 4 guys that were on the ice for 2.5 minutes in the middle of just trying to clear the puck out of the zone.
That's crazy, dude.
It's wild. But part of it, there's not much Drew Bannister can do because there were no whistles. Yeah. You didn't hit the net. There were a couple of icings. You were stuck there. And even Ken Hitchcock used to say, I would rather you push the puck down the ice and ice the puck. Now, could you have called a timeout there? Maybe, but I don't really remember if the Blues had their timeout. I don't know if they called it prior.
I believe they did.
So maybe you call a timeout in that spot to give your guys a breath, but all of these big picture, if you're going to lump them together, they're just small decisions that take place in the game. And again, I hate to
you can't take a timeout, though, after the icing.
With an icing, there's no timeout. Okay.
I was like, I want to make sure that I'm not speaking out of turn here. I feel like that's the case. But
all of these things are just symptoms of a team that is in the midst of a retool.
Yep.
Like I referenced before, like the Montreal Canadiens are a team that has been bad for a really long time. You got to figure out what winning tastes like. And that is what the Blues have to do. They got to figure out that, hey, we made these dumb mistakes, and now we have to push forward. Go back to last season, BK. This team was the second best team in one-goal games in terms of win percentage. It was a .654 win percentage. They were 17-3-6. They knew how to close out games. Now, you ask, why is this team different? Well, this team's a little bit different because you have, at least for some of those games, you don't have your number one center on the ice who can close out some games for you, and you've got different personnel that's out there compared to where you were before. But this was the conversation, and I'm sorry this is long-winded. This was the conversation that Curbs and I had last night. And Curbs, I thought, painted a perfect picture. When you're a retooling team, you don't have a game breaker. You don't have a guy that when he steps on the ice, he can bust that game wide open. And meaning, like, you were in a 2-2 hockey game the other night. Obviously, you were in a 2-1 game prior to San Jose scoring with 8 seconds left. When you have a game breaker, that 2-1 game quickly can become a 3-1 game. You can put that game away. Kyle Connor, a game breaker for the Winnipeg Jets. Vladimir Tarasenko was that game breaker. But if you're the Blues, when you drafted him, you have to wait until he can get to the NHL. His debut was 2012, 2013. And this goes into my conversation of why you have to learn how to win these types of games. 2009, 2010, the Blues were 35, 22, and 21 in one-goal games. So in 2009, 2010, when this team was retooling or rebuilding, whatever you're going to call it, out of their 81 games played that season, I'm doing quick math here as I talk, 79 of them were one-goal games. And you had a .497 win percentage. The following season, this was the year that Ken Hitchcock took over midseason, and he brought in that tight hockey game style. You were 27-11. 39 of your 81 games or 82 games were played in one-goal games, and you had a .526 win percentage. So you figured out how to close out games. And then when your game breaker showed up, 21 of your games in the year that Tarasenko was there, you played in one-goal games. So what do I mean by all of this? You're in a spot now where you don't have a game breaker. You don't have the guy that can bust a game wide open with one shift, one shot like Tarasenko was. Until you get there, you got to figure out how to close these games. And how do you close out these games? You play simple hockey to where rather than trying to win it with skill, you win it with time management. You put the puck deep and you get it to overtime and you come out on top.
To your point, goals scored in these games that we're talking about. 1, 2, 2, 3, 2. Last night, 2. It's so hard to win this way, dude.
Yeah.
It is so incredibly difficult to win over time when you're consistently scoring 2 to 3 goals. So whether that's adding a game-changing element to your lineup with whoever that may be, like a legit sniper that comes in and is able to add on, this is what the Cardinals dealt with all season long. Where it's like, hey, man, when you're only scoring 3 runs every single night, yeah, you're going to be in a lot of one-run games. And you've got the bullpen they did to be able to close these things out, but man, you can't ask them to be perfect every night. Eventually, even the best bullpens have like a 3 ERA, which means on average, if they're giving you 3 innings every single night, every 3 games they're giving up a run.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to happen for them. And when they do, it feels like it's impossible to overcome if you're the Cardinals. That's basically what you're asking out of your goaltenders right now, where you have to be perfect in these final moments. Or for the skaters, you have to be perfect in these final moments. There's going to be turnovers, man. And so we're going to remember it like Kyrou. There's some bad turnovers that are taking place this season, especially in this 6-game stretch that we're talking about right now. Or last night where they had that timeout and about 1:47 to go when the Sharks end up taking the timeout. They decide to leave those guys on the ice for the final minute and a half there.
Yeah.
And so you have like a minute before and then a minute and a half after. They're second-guessing. Should you have done that? Shouldn't you have done that? This is what happens when you play so many freaking tight games. Mm-hmm. But I said this like 5 games into the season. We can now see, I said it after that New York Islanders game. This is who the Blues are. They're going to have to win super tight games. And right now, like there's that old saying of you lose big, you lose close, you win close, you win big. Mm-hmm. That's what the Detroit Lions went through. They went through this stretch where they started out, they were losing big. They were terrible, right? And then about midway through, when Dan Campbell was really starting to get this thing going, they were losing close games. And then they won a couple of them midway through that season. Then that next year was like, okay, now they're really starting to win a lot of these close games. There's something that is building. And then you see it this year. It's like, holy crap. They are laying it on everybody, where they're just winning these games by these crazy margins. The Blues are still in that lose close phase of their build.
Yep.
It's going to take some time. I don't think this is some like massive problem for them because, as you said, you can point to different things that are leading to these issues. I don't think this is necessarily a coaching issue down the stretch. I don't think it's necessarily even like a true player issue where there's like stuff they're doing wrong. I think it's a personnel problem. And it's really the first 58 minutes are leading to these problems in the last 2 minutes.
I think it's a trust problem, too. Like, I think there's lack of trust, obviously, in terms of personnel when Bolduc, Holloway, Joseph don't play for, 8 minutes, I think is what it was last night. Like, you didn't see them for the final 8 minutes of the game.
That was weird.
If you don't trust lines or players, well, now you're shortening the bench. And you know what happens when you shorten the bench? Those guys get gassed quick. And when you need them out there late, you don't have the ability. The Blues were so good for so long because they trusted their top line just as much as they trusted their fourth line. And it feels like late in games, you're seeing Thomas on the ice, Buchnevich on the ice, Shen on the ice, Faksa on the ice, Neighbours on the ice.
The following players did not play in the final 7 minutes of the game last night in regulation. Scott Perunovich, Corey Schuneman, Zach Bolduc, Matthew Joseph, Dylan Holloway.
So you went from a 20-man bench to a 15-man bench.
Just completely avoided them at all times. They had 0 shifts in the final 7 minutes and 15 seconds of the game.
But it's not just the trust from the coach. It's the trust of the players, too. Like, the players have to trust themselves. They can't second-guess a decision when you're out there on the ice because there's no time to second-guess your decision. When you're out there, there's no let's make the extra pass to get this one so it's a clear shot to the empty net. No, you just got to take it for the empty net any chance you get. And if it comes out, it ices the puck, you win the faceoff again. So, again, you've got to get comfortable being uncomfortable, and that's what the Blues are still trying to figure out. It's weird, though, because they were good at it last year.
But this goes back to the expectations, man. Like, every single thing that I point to that I'm like, that feels kind of weird. If you think about it through the sense of, yeah, but they believe they're a playoff team. It's like, that explains it. Hey, why aren't Dylan Holloway and Zach Bolduc on the ice at the end of these games? They're young players. They're prone to mistakes. They're potentially going to be the ones that cough up the puck in the bad situations. And Dylan Holloway is not a natural centerman. So are you really going to, put him out there over Braden Shin or Brandon Saad or Pavel Buchnevich or Jordan Kyrou with 5 minutes to go? Jordan Kyrou was replaced on his own line at the end of this game for the final 3 minutes once again last night.
Has been that nonstop.
All of these things make sense if you think to yourself, they're doing this because they still view themselves as a legitimate playoff team. Even if that is the quote-unquote wrong approach, they see themselves that way, and that's ultimately what matters.
Yeah.
He's Alex Ferrario. I'm Brandon Kiley. Jordan Deacon back in the studio for us today. We're broadcasting live at the E&B Granite Studios out of the Centene Community Ice Center. Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll dive into the junk drawer, but next, time for some NFL quick hitters leading into an interesting week in the NFL. We'll do that next here on 101 ESPN.
101 ESPN Sports Center.
I'm Jordan Deacon. The Sports Center update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Last night, the Blues welcomed in the San Jose Sharks and came away with a 3-2 shootout win. They're back in action tomorrow night right here on 101 ESPN, taking on the New York Islanders. Pre-game coverage starts at 5:30 and puck drop is at 6:30. But before the Blues game, we've got college football action for you starting at 10:30 in the morning. And then on Sunday, the NFL tripleheader begins at 11. I'm Jordan Deacon. The Sports Center update was brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
We're back to more exclusive Blues talk. 101 ESPN is live from the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light and E&B Granite. Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Alongside Alex Ferrario, I'm Brandon Kiley. We've got Jordan Deacon back in the studio for us as we are broadcasting live at the E&B Granite Studios out of the Centene Community Ice Center. We'll get to the junk drawer in 10 minutes, but first we got to get into some NFL quick hitters. Alex, let's start with last night's game. We talked earlier today about the Steelers side of things. I do want to ask you about the Browns. Jameis Winston was fine last night. Given the elements, I actually feel like he played a pretty decent game overall. 18 for 27, 220 yards through the air, an interception, and was sacked once against an excellent defensive line. Is Jameis Winston making you wonder if he can earn that job heading into next year? Not the long-term answer, but can he potentially be their answer for 2020?
I think he should be. And just like Joe Flacco should have been their answer for 2024. Yeah. Like, if I'm Cleveland, I have now used 2 backup quarterbacks that have played better than the guy that I am paying hundreds of millions of dollars to. If I'm the Browns, and I don't know what the cap hit casualty is when you deal with this, I'm done with Deshaun Watson.
You can't cut him.
Well,
legitimately can't cut him.
Guess what, man? You get to be a safety scout for our team for the rest of your career here in Cleveland, unless you facilitate a trade, which nobody's going to be taking you. But, yes, Jameis Winston, whoever I have in-house right now, has an opportunity to be my starting quarterback next season, because we should not be dealing with Deshaun Watson anymore. At the start of this year, let's say Jameis Winston starts the first 4 games of the season and you go 2-2. You're at least in a spot right now where you're considered a quality playoff team to where you could get in. That's why you just move on from Deshaun Watson.
I'm with you. I'd be interested in it. I don't know. I don't think he's going to be their long-term answer, but I think Jameis Winston can. You remember Ryan Fitzpatrick?
Yeah.
When he had a little bit of a late career renaissance where he was with the Bills and eventually with Tampa Bay, played with Miami for a little bit as well. I think he could be that. I think he could be the guy that you bring in for a year. He's beloved by his teammates. He's going to push the ball down the field. You talk about a YOLO offense. That's Jameis Winston to a T. He's probably not going to get you to more than 9-10 wins maybe at a maximum because he's going to throw the ball to the other team too often. But, hey, man, he gives a ceiling to your offense that you certainly do not have with Deshaun. I'm open to it. Let's see what it looks like the rest of the way.
He's cheap, so I can invest in all other areas of my roster rather than worrying about paying the quarterback as much money as they make.
The problem for them, they're already stuck. Like that's a sunk cost for them. They're already going to have to pay the quarterback position $50 million regardless. All right, next thing up here. There was a new NFL mock draft released earlier today from Matt Miller of ESPN.com. He had Shedeur Sanders going number 1 overall to the New York Giants. He had Travis Hunter going number 2 to the Cleveland Browns. He's got an offensive tackle from Texas going number 3. Cam Ward, the quarterback at Miami, going number 4 to the Las Vegas Raiders. I wanted to ask you about his number 5 pick. He's got Luther Burden going number 5 overall to the Tennessee Titans. Another former Mizzou wide receiver going to the Titans. That didn't work out so well the last time with DGB. Another top recruit that went to Mizzou, ended up with the Titans. Maybe this will be different. Alex, do you think Luther Burden's a legitimate top 10 pick?
I don't. I haven't seen it this season to make me believe he's a legit top 10 pick. Now, I know that the season has just gone haywire and things haven't worked out well. Brady Cook's been injured. But if I'm talking about a legit top 10 pick in the NFL, this is a guy who makes something out of nothing. And I don't know if I could say that with Luther Burden. I think he's got the speed. I think he's got the talent. I think he could be I don't think he's going to be as impactful as former top 10 picks in terms of wide receiver. If you're the Titans and you take him 5th overall, I think it is more likely that you're saying, man, that is a bust of a pick for us than you're talking about what a steal we got at 5.
So here are the guys that went in the top 10 last year. Wide receivers. Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbours, Rome Odunze. The year before that, none of the wide receivers went in the top 10. The year before that, Drake London and Garrett Wilson went top 10 overall. The year before that, Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith. I just don't know that, to me, Luther Burden fits into that criteria. I think he's closer to, like, and this is not to suggest what their NFL career is, but as prospects, what they were coming out of college. I think he's closer to Kadarius Toney, who went 20th overall.
I was
in
thinking
that
middle
draft.
to back end of the draft.
Jamison Williams, who went 12th. Traylon Burks, who went 18th. He was a little bit of a gadget player in college. Quentin Johnston, who had a big season for TCU. He went 21st overall. Last year, Brian Thomas Jr., 23rd overall. I think he's more in that range. To me, I still think he's a first-round pick, but I believe, maybe this speaks to the lack of talent in this year's draft, though. I believe he's more of like a 15 to 32 type of a pick, and probably in that 15 to 25 most likely.
I mean, like, and look, he's size-wise, he's very similar to Malik Neighbours, to where it's like, look, he's not the biggest dude. He's not like Jamar Chase out there where he's 6'3" something, and he's not one of those Tavon Austins where he's tiny and that's all he is. He's just fast.
He's built like a running back.
The problem with it, though, is like that type of player, I should see you making a difference on the team in the SEC, like Malik Neighbours was doing with LSU. And maybe some of that's symptoms of the quarterback, to where you had Jaden Daniels versus you've got Brady Cook. But there's been a couple of moments where it's like, whoa, look at Luther Burden. But a couple of moments doesn't mean you're a top 5 pick in the NFL draft.
All right, last couple of things here real quick. I do want to ask you about Daniel Jones. It was reported just a little bit ago. You said Josina Anderson had this?
Josina Anderson.
She reported that the Dallas Cowboys will not be interested in Daniel Jones. So I'm a little surprised by that. I thought he would have been a good fit for them. Alex, if not the Cowboys, where do you think Daniel Jones will end up?
I would, if I'm him, I would do the Titans. And now I don't know if he ends up there. Frankly, I don't know if somebody picks Daniel Jones up. If I'm the Titans, I'm calling him right now and saying, hey, you want in? Because I don't have a quarterback if I'm Tennessee. Now, I just drafted, I think it was an offensive tackle at this past draft. You've got at least weapons that you believe are good on the offensive side. And defensively, you've been a pretty competent team. You don't have a quarterback. And I don't think there's going to be any quarterbacks at 5th overall that really make that much of a difference for you in this year's draft. Why not take a shot on Daniel Jones? You got one season, half of a season, to be our number 1 guy. Go out there and make a difference. And if you do, we'll give you a 1-year contract to where you can prove yourself.
Do you think he has the capability to do that on that team, though?
Not on
like,
that
the
team.
Titans are bad.
Yep.
They don't have real legitimate weapons. Daniel Jeremiah, who does really good work for the NFL Network, said Daniel Jones has 2 options right now. Join a dumpster fire team and start a few games down the stretch, basically an audition without a rehearsal, or join a playoff team as a backup, soak up as much knowledge as possible from the head coach, offensive coordinator, and quarterback to Daniel Jeremiah. Option number 2 is, quote, by far the best move, to join a playoff team as a backup. I could see Buffalo being a really good spot for him.
If you're him, though, I don't know if it makes sense for me to go be a backup, because the narrative right now is I'm a bad quarterback. And don't you have to go prove that wrong before you get to next offseason?
I don't know that you're going to be able to prove that wrong with the Titans. That's why I thought, to me, Dallas was a good spot. You've got a legitimate number 1 wide receiver. You've got a real tight end there. Like, you don't have much of a running game, but there's real stuff in place for you with Dallas where you could potentially have some success. I don't think that exists in Tennessee. The infrastructure isn't
there. It would
there.
create so much noise, and this team wouldn't do it. But you know the one that would be pretty interesting to me? San Francisco.
As a backup, you're saying?
As a backup, but, I mean, Purdy has not been great.
See, I disagree. I think Purdy's played pretty well this year. I think the stuff around him has fallen apart. They don't have the running game they did. Christian McCaffrey just got back and doesn't look explosive. They've had guys in and out of the lineup. Debo's been hurt. Ayuk is out. I think the offense in general hasn't been as good. I would not, if I'm doing this with Daniel Jones, it would be made clear day one.
You're the backup.
This guy's coming in just like if he was backing up Josh Allen to be Brock Purdy's backup.
Yeah.
But
Honestly, the Steelers, they already got 17 quarterbacks. Why not go get another one?
Yeah.
There's no team, though, that, like, you can go to and it gives you a real shot to prove yourself other than the Cowboys, and I don't think they're going to do that.
And that's why I think I get what Daniel Jeremiah is saying here. If you're not going to Dallas, I would probably go the route that he did. We saw this last year with, who was it? Guy for Minnesota.
Darnold.
Darnold.
Yeah.
Darnold went out to San Francisco. Ended up with Shanahan out there, and without playing, suddenly became, without getting real legitimate snaps, suddenly became one of the top guys available on the market this offseason.
Didn't Trubisky do that too the first time around with Buffalo, or he was the backup?
Yeah, he was the backup.
Didn't he go somewhere, though, prior to this season? He went to Pittsburgh, and they gave him the shot, and he wasn't good, and he went back to Buffalo.
But if you go to the right place, you can rehabilitate your image. Suddenly, it's like, okay, well, that guy was in a good room. I don't know why it works, but it works nonetheless.
Yeah.
Maybe you go be with, like, Houston, Buffalo, one of these spots where you're behind a legit star quarterback.
Houston would be interesting at the end of the season when you don't play Stroud to rest him, and you get one game with Nico Collins, Tank Dell. That would be an interesting one. But, yeah, you might be right. You're going to have to be a backup somewhere if you want a shot.
Minnesota's another one.
Yeah.
Maybe you go up there, back up Sam Darnold. And
doesn't McCartney have another surgery?
Yeah. If anything happens, suddenly you're inserted into the lineup for a legitimate playoff team. All right, he's Alex Ferrario. I'm Brandon Kiley. We'll get into our NFL weekend look ahead in the 1 o'clock hour. But coming up next, time for the junk drawer here on 101 ESPN.
wall Blues coverage is right here. 101 ESPN is live from the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light and E&B Granite. Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. Let's open it up. A junk drawer with BK and Ferrario.
Ferrario and Jordan Binnington. I'm Brandon Kiley. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Alex, I don't think you've reached this point yet. I certainly haven't. But do your kids have homework that they bring home that you try to help them with yet?
No, not yet, thankfully. My sister has it, though, with my nieces. They're 9 and 8, and I see the homework they bring home. And I got to be honest, I'm not looking forward to that.
I'm nervous. Math has changed. There's a new math that they're now teaching.
What's the deal with that?
Don't understand it. We no longer do cursive. That actually feels to me like a good change. Don't get mad at me.
I'm good about that.
I don't use cursive in my everyday life. And I remember when I was growing up, they would always say, like, hey, you're not always going to have a calculator with you. And
yeah, you literally
here
do.
we are. At all times.
This is actually bigger than the calculators I used to have in school. So they really lied about that.
So the reason I bring this up is because a Wisconsin sheriff's office had an unexpected call recently. A 10-year-old called in to ask for help on their math homework. This came up about a week ago after the child let the emergency line know, hey, I need a little bit of help. We need some help with this problem. She said, quote, can I get some help with this problem? And they asked for what the problem was, and it was about decimals. She said, let me get a deputy near your residence to help you out. Now, this is not your typical call that you'd expect. This is in some town in Wisconsin, so it wasn't a huge deal, but
that's amazing.
They decided to help him out a little bit. Worked out pretty well is what they said. She was on GMA. They got everything all figured out. But
did they figure out the math problem, though?
It sounds like it.
Okay, good.
Sounds like it.
What a great operator.
Can you imagine being the operator on the other line where your job is to be like responding to these potential life and death calls all day long? That's what your life's work is. You're always on. Go, 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 right? And so you're like waiting for what the other end of the phone is about to say, and you have this 10-year-old kid that's calling in and saying, like, hey, I need help with a problem that I've got. And you're on the other line like, okay, stay calm. What can I do for you?
I have a problem.
I don't understand the Pythagorean theorem. It doesn't make sense to me, and I need you to explain it.
How many points do the decimals switch over? Honestly, though, like, props to that 911 operator, because, like, I'm going from a parent's mindset here. Like, you teach your children at a certain age, when there's a problem, you call 911.
Absolutely.
And so, like, if that operator were to get frustrated with the 10-year-old and be like, you can't call the police unless this is an emergency. Give me your mom and dad. The kid gets scared, and then it's like, well, I don't want to ever call them. Like, props to that operator for being calm, handling it, helping solve the problem, which is more important. Because now the kid's, like, not afraid of 911, and then it's back in the parent's hand of, like, hey, only call 911 in case of an emergency.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. This comes from the 314. Totally unrelated, but on the subject of things that we used to learn in school that now we don't. It said, have you seen young people try to learn how to sign their names without learning cursive previously? It's absolutely hilarious. My name, when I sign it, is just scribbles. There's a B, there's a K, and then there's a bunch of scribbles that go along with it. It's because I used to think I was going to be this pro athlete, right? I was like 13 years old, and I would like practice my signature because whenever I signed the basketball, it was obviously this was going to happen. It was very likely.
It was a basketball.
I was a basketball player growing up. Whenever I would sign my signature, I would see what professional athletes would do, and you can't read any of them. No. It's not legible. So it's like, oh, that's clearly how you sign your name. So I would just practice all day. Just like, here's what my signature is going to look like. It's an atrocity. It's horrific.
Yeah, I do it fast. Mine's the same way. It's AF. When I was in school, though, I was so meticulous with the cursive that it was slow. Like, I'd be like, A, L, E, X, and it'd be legible. But it would take me like 5 minutes to sign, because if you didn't do it right, you'd have to start over again. Now it's like, hey, you mind signing this contract? Like, yeah, here you go. And then, I always joke with Katie that if somebody ever, questions the contract that we sign and be like, this is your signature, right? I might realistically say, I don't think so.
I don't know.
That might not be mine. There's an A, there's an F, but it could not be mine.
My mom used to have the easiest signature, and the only reason I say that is because we used to have, I don't know if you guys had this in school, Alex. I can't imagine they have it anymore, but we had the planner that you would have to get signed at the end of the day by your parents, so that way they knew that you got this signed by your parents.
I used to love that planner.
And we would get I don't even remember, we'd get in trouble somehow, some way, if we didn't have the signatures that were necessary. Yeah. And so there would be days, because I'm a dumb idiot as a kid, and still to this day, where I would forget to get my mom to sign the signature.
Forge that bad boy.
100%.
Hell yeah.
It was a worthwhile skill to know how to sign your parents' name.
This might not surprise a lot of people, but in grade school, I had a problem with talking. When class was going, I would talk the whole time. And so my teacher used to make me bring a piece of paper home. No joke, this was from second grade until 7th grade. I used to have to get a paper brought home that was given to my parents that said Alex talked X amount of times, and it had to be signed and brought back. Man, by about 4th grade, I could sign the hell out of Judy and Ernie Ferrario.
He's Alex. I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Coming up in 15 minutes. Are we ready to say that this is who Jake Neighbours is going to be for the Blues? Suddenly looks the part for sure. We'll talk about him coming up in about 15 minutes. But next, what do the next 2 weeks mean for how we view this season for Mizzou and Illinois? We'll talk about it here on 101 ESPN.
Blues talk more often. 101 ESPN is live from the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light and E&B Granite. Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Bit of news for any of you fantasy football players out there. The Chiefs have officially ruled out Isaiah Pacheco for Sunday's game against the Carolina Panthers. So if you have Pacheco in your starting lineup, assuming that he was going to play this week, that will not be the case. He will be out this week. My guess is they're probably going to get him back in next week at home against the Las Vegas Raiders. That's the Black Friday game. So then he'll get a full, 10 days to be able to rest up for the following week. So that's my guess on it, but they have announced officially today Isaiah Pacheco will not be playing on Sunday.
Props to you, Chiefs, because you saved me from playing Adam Thielen as a flex, and we all know that wouldn't have been a good idea.
All right, so on the college football side of things, Mizzou back in action tomorrow. They play against Mississippi State. It is the third time they have played Mississippi State since joining the SEC. Fun fact here for you, Alex. Mississippi State is one of two teams that Missouri has yet to beat on the football field since joining the conference. The other is Alabama. They're 0-2 against Mississippi State thus far, including a game in 2020 that I genuinely have no recollection of. Apparently, that was back at the end of the season when they had 100 different COVID cases. Sean Robinson, previously a quarterback for them, was playing at corner. Drake Heismeyer, who's currently their starting center, was playing defensive tackle. They had a defensive tackle that I think was playing linebacker for them. It was a weird game, so throw that one out. But Mizzou versus Mississippi State this weekend, and then T-Bone was talking about this yesterday. Illinois back in action tomorrow on Peacock against Rutgers on the road. Rutgers is a 1-point favorite in that one, so it's basically a pick'em. The reason I bring this up, Alex, for you, whether it's Mizzou, Illinois, combination of both, how much do the final couple weeks of this regular season matter in terms of how you're going to remember these seasons for those two respective teams?
I don't think it's going to matter. Maybe not so much Illinois, because I don't have my finger on the pulse of that team as much as T-Bone does. But obviously I pay closer attention to Mizzou. I don't really know if whatever they do for the rest of this season is going to matter. I'm going to remember this season as a disappointment. I know that upsets you, but I thought this was a playoff contending team, and the offense didn't show. You're going to go back to that A&M game, and you're going to look back and be like, man, that was the what if. And here's the thing when it comes to this season. I don't even know if it sets you up for next year, in my opinion. Let's say you get to 9 wins, you finish these last two with wins, and you're like, hey, that's a good season by Drink. Yes, you weren't at 10 or 11, but you got to 9. I'm going to look at this team and say none of this matters until you go find the next quarterback. And that's why it's I could see Brady Cook play well down the stretch. I could see this offense kind of open up a little bit more. But to me, it's going to be their last-ditch effort to breathe life into a bad season, or underwhelming season. I shouldn't say a bad season. So I'm not really sure anything that takes place from the stretch would be hey, good job by you to get to 9 wins. But it's still going to be a tough season for me, and I'm still going to be watching to see what you do with the main position that you need to fix for next year.
Yeah, but that feels like it's simplifying things a lot. You know what's really nice if you're a player that's coming in that's one of those transfer quarterbacks, being able to join a team that won 11 and 10 games in consecutive seasons with a guy that is probably worse than you at the quarterback position. The sell for Drinkwitz becomes a lot easier.
Yeah.
If they get to 9 wins throughout the regular season, potentially win their bowl game, and they can go to somebody and say, hey, look at what we've been able to do. If we get you in here and plop you in at the quarterback position, you can take us to that next level where next year we are in a college football playoff because we added you. So I think it does matter. 9-3 to me feels much different than 7-5. Much different if you're Mizzou. So if they lost the next 2 weeks, first of all, I think it speaks to them giving up. They're better than Mississippi State. Missouri, you can talk about whatever flaws you want to about their team. They're a better team than Mississippi State is. They've got a decent offense. Their defense is horrific. They should win this game. And then Arkansas, I believe Missouri to be slightly better than as well. You should finish the season 9-3, and then we'll see what bowl game you get into. And that doesn't really matter, but getting 10 wins would be nice nonetheless. I think that changes things. And T-Bone was talking about this the other day. You look a couple of years ago when they had that Chase Brown season. They started the year 7-1. And then they lost 3 straight games, including a heartbreaker, both at home, both opponents. You shouldn't have lost those games. And it resulted in you not being able to reach that ceiling kind of a season. They should have had 10 wins that year. And I know people laugh at me because I think that these games matter, and that I think that it's important to get to 9-3 or 10-2, and that should be remembered fondly moving forward. I think that this is the kind of year that for both of these teams, these final two games really matter.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you there in terms of if you fall to 7-5 on the year, that's an underwhelming, and you're basically losing out on bringing in commits. The two wins are important in terms of how you deliver the message as a university. But I also, you know how athletes are, whether it's college or pro, there's an ego that goes to where it's like, I could be the reason that it's fixed. And I feel like you'd be able to sell it, even if it's a 7-5 program, to where, hey, we were an 11-win team last year. We didn't live up to expectations, but you're the guy that gets us back to that level.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. It looks like we might be having some technical difficulties, so I'm going to go ahead and check on that coming up next. Are we ready to say that this is who Jake Neighbours is? We'll talk about it here on BK and Ferrario.
back to more exclusive Blues talk. 101 ESPN is live from the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light and E&B Granite. Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
I found it to be really interesting last night when Drew Bannister decided to go with Jake Neighbours as one of the options in the
shootout.
The shootout after the game. That is not something I was anticipating. You got Braden Shin, Jordan Kyrou, and then you got like Robert Thomas, Pavel Buchnevich, the guys that are on the top line for you. He decided to go with Jake Neighbours, and it worked out. He ends up scoring the goal that ultimately wins you the game, but that's not the kind of thing I was anticipating. It makes you wonder, is he starting to jump up the ranks of the guys that they trust to get him a goal when it matters the most? Makes sense. He is tied with Jordan Kyrou at this point among the team lead in goals so far this year. There was a point in time, probably, 10 games into the season, where we're like, uh-oh, is it coming back to earth a little bit for Jake Neighbours? Mm-hmm. Is he not going to be the same goal scorer this year that we expected him to be? No. He's got 6 goals now. He's on pace for 25 this year. Alex, where are you at with Jake Neighbours? And it's only 21 games in, but we're a quarter of the way through the season now. Where are your expectations now long-term with Jake Neighbours and the kind of player that he can be for the Blues?
I still believe he's a top 6 winger for the Blues. I think the style that he plays anywhere in your lineup. Now, the offense obviously doesn't back it up, but with Jake Neighbours, every line needs a net front presence. And I personally believe your top line needs a net front presence, because if you've got a number 1 centerman and if you've got a number 1 winger that you believe can score goals, you've got to have a guy who takes the eyes away from the goaltender. Because a lot of the time that cycle game, that off-the-rush style, it looks sexy, but a lot of the times these goaltenders are really good. And if they've got a clear shot to the puck, they're going to stop it. And if you don't have a net front presence, you're going to be a one-dimensional line. So I think Jake Neighbours plays anywhere. Jake Neighbours this season, though, he's just going through it. And I do believe, now it's not his sophomore season. This is his 3rd season.
But basically,
it's his second
really
full season. And I think this happens when you're in your sophomore season. Teams understand how to play against you a little bit more. Teams know how to scout against you. He's 22 years old, and he's getting some of the biggest and baddest defensemen in the NHL that are making sure he does not stand in front of the net. So you know what you have to do? You have to adapt. But here's why I'm still optimistic about Jake Neighbours. Because when one element of his game isn't working, he's doing 2 other things to find it back to that first element that got him to this level. And what I mean by that is when you can't stand in front of the net and get those tips, what are you doing? Well, you're stirring it up a little bit. You're generating offensive zone space along the boards. You're laying some checks. And I know the defensive numbers are what people are going to go to and say he's a -9 on the season.
I did want to ask about that. Jake Neighbours was a -19 in 2023, and that was in 43 games. Last year was a -16 in 77 games. So far this year, he's a -10, and if you pace that out over the course of the full season, he's on pace to be like a -40 this year. That's a lot of fun with numbers, but Jordan Kyrou 2 years ago was a -38, and he got a lot of flack for that, deservingly so. Last year he was a -12, and people will say, well, that was a super disappointing season. Sure, he had 31 goals, but he was a minus on the ice. This year he's a +3, and I don't hear a lot about his plus-minus. I hear a lot about, hey, he had the turnover that ended up in the back of their net. It's like, yes, bad play, but that goes into the plus-minus. How much should I care about the fact that in his career, we have now seen in 150 games, Jake Neighbours is a -50.
Yeah. You should care about it in the sense, it's not a number that you want next to your name. Now, my argument for Jake Neighbours, one, and I'm going through this now, that's why I slid out of the camera angle there. At least so far that I'm going through, the Blues have had 4 empty net goals that have gone against them. And Jake Neighbours is on the ice for those empty net goals. Why? Because they believe that they can tie the game up.
So was Jordan Kyrou.
So was Jordan Kyrou, which is also the plus-minus, but you've got Jordan Kyrou that's contributing. Sorry, it was 5 empty net goals. Now I'd have to find out if it was all Jake Neighbours or not. But that plays into it a little bit with Jake. But here's the other factor. So the first 6 games of the season, Jake Neighbours was a -2. The last 3 games of the season, he's a -1. Why am I bringing those numbers up? because he's not playing with Pavel Buchnevich as a number one center. And I think that's been the other main reason why that line and why his plus-minuses haven't looked great. Now, he hasn't been with them all season, but he played a lot with Pavel Buchnevich on the top line when Robert Thomas was down because they didn't have anybody else. It was Neighbours, it was Buch, it was Kyrou, because that was their top line. And in that span, 10 games, Jake Neighbours was a -6. So I think he suffered from, and I'm not taking all responsibility away from him because you are still on the ice, but I think he suffered from an inexperienced centerman going up against the other team's top lines, and you're playing the wing with that centerman. There's more responsibility that you have to take into your own hands.
I would say the same thing is true of Jordan Kyrou.
Yeah.
Like, all of these things you're saying to defend Jake Neighbours?
But Jordan Kyrou also has not been on the ice for the final 4 or 5 minutes in third periods when they're tied games or when you're down by a goal.
When you're down by a goal, he is. When you're up by a goal, he's not out there protecting the lead. Sure, but those are typically situations where you're like, it's a little different, but whatever. Jordan Kyrou has been in those situations at times in the past. This year, not so much. Jake Neighbours, a lot of the time previously, to be fair, was also not in those spots because he was a guy that was considered to be a third or fourth line player. You wanted your top line players on the ice for that. I like Jake Neighbours. You know how I feel about Jake Neighbours. I think he's awesome. I think the guy rocks, and I think he's a legit top 6 forward at this point in his career, and I'm expecting about 25 goals on average per season. He's not going to be a guy that puts up big assist numbers because that's not his game, and that's fine. You don't need him to be. Stick your ass in front of the net and go to work right in front of the goalie and in the crease. What I think it's frustrating for me sometimes is I think Jordan Kyrou's having a really freaking good season, man.
Totally.
And I think it's going wildly underrated because people don't like him. Like, they've made their decisions on what Jordan Kyrou is. They've made their decisions on what Jake Neighbours is, and it's because of the style of play. It's not about the results from their play. It's about the style of play between the two guys, and it's about specific moments because of how Kyrou plays, where he is somebody that has the puck on his stick a lot. He makes plays for others, which leads to the assist numbers being boosted. It also leads to mistakes going the other direction. Jake Neighbours doesn't have those potential mistakes because the puck isn't on his stick. He's somebody that's right in front of the net, which avoids those kinds of potential costly mistakes more often than not. So I bring all of this up because when I've got one guy who's a -47 in his career and another guy in Jordan Kyrou who is a -36 in 355 games, whereas Neighbours is a -47 in less than half of the number of games, and people love Neighbours and hate Kyrou, I like to explore why that is. What's leading to this? And I think it speaks to, in my opinion, the unfair nature of how we are evaluating Jordan Kyrou.
You're not wrong. I mean, Jordan Kyrou does get the unfair side of this because people have their opinion on him. I think if you were to poll a lot of Blues fans and ask why, they would say, or why you're talking, or we're not talking about him, but you were talking about him when he was bad, they would say, well, he's making $8 million, so he should be playing this way. And my $8 million player should be this good, so I don't need to talk about him.
But we were doing this before Kyrou made $8 million.
You're absolutely right.
We did this whenever he was on that bridge deal, too.
I think Jake Neighbours plays to the style that Blues fans are used to.
100%.
Whether you like that or not, because, look, the Blues drafted Jordan Kyrou, and you should have known what you were getting. Blues fans gravitate towards the guys that go out there, and no matter if you're a part of the play or you're not a part of the play, you're generating some type of noise on the ice. Physicality.
Blues
and not
fans
even
like
physicality.
grinders. Hockey fans like grinders.
Not even just physicality, though. It's just guys that lay everything out there on the ice.
But you see that through the physicality. Like, that's the way, like, the try-hard nature of it is shown through getting in the board battles.
But you also see it when you block shots. When you're jumping in front of shots in the defensive zone to make sure that the other team doesn't get the puck on net.
All of that is the same stuff of, like, physicality, right? Wearing it for the team, all of these different... I don't want Kyrou doing that stuff, man. I don't want Kyrou blocking shots. It results in what we saw from Robert Thomas. Like, I don't want those guys getting hurt. Their value is skating and shooting the puck and opening things up for others. It's why Robert Thomas and Pavel Buchnevich aren't playing much on the PK this year.
But to win hockey games, you have to play that way.
No, I need other guys to play that way. I need Jake Neighbours to play that way. I don't need Jordan Kyrou in game 21 of an 82-game season when I'm trying to get to the postseason, and really when I'm trying to get, like, in the playoffs, totally. Put your body on the line, man. You got to do it. But, like, I don't want my star quarterback taking hits in week 6 of the NFL season.
But you know what happens when you do, and you're right, like, I don't need my star blocking shots. But you know what happens when that's the mindset? Fans gravitate towards the guys that do play that style from start to finish and get banged up and still find ways to contribute. And the guys that are in and out of plays because they don't want to get injured, and I'm not saying that's Kyrou's mindset. We're just talking about how I don't want guys to do that. When you're doing that style, that's when there's a lot more criticism that follows that type of player.
I hear you. I
mean, Mitch Marner's one of those guys that gets it all the time in Toronto. Like, you put up points, that's great. But if you're not generating, or if you're not a part of the winning on the ice in terms of the style, you're going to get as much blowback as you can personally ask.
Yeah, I just think sometimes it's really unfair. Like, I think Kyrou has received way too much blowback this season. I think Kyrou's having the best season of his NHL career. I really do. We're seeing his all-around game improve. It's not perfect. It's never going to be perfect. But it's already, like, exceeded, honestly, what I thought he was capable of. On the defensive side, like, there are still turnovers, especially in key moments, but it's not as bad as it has been in the past. I think he's setting other guys up really well. He's playing a more well-rounded team game. Dude, did you see the way that he was working without the puck yesterday?
Yeah, he was body checking. He was taking guys off the puck
yesterday in that game. He has 6 goals and 18 points this season. He has a point in 9 of the last 10 games, and this has been a critique in the past, so I'm going to give him credit whenever we critique him for something. I think we should also give him credit when he's doing the thing that we critique him for. He has a point in 9 of the last 10, which means he's a big part of these games. He's not just, like, going through a 6-game stretch where he disappears from the ice and doesn't produce at all. He's producing consistently. Instead of it being like 1 game with 3, 6 games with no points, it's every game right now he is putting up at least a point. So I'm using Jake Neighbours not as an example of like, hey, Jake Neighbours shouldn't be getting the praise that he gets. I think he should be. I also think if we're going to praise Jake Neighbours for 6 goals and 3 assists and a -10 on the ice, we should definitely be giving the credit where it's due to Jordan Kyrou, who has 6 goals, 12 points, and is a +3 on a pretty bad hockey team right now. That's really damn impressive what we've seen so far this year from Jordan Kyrou. His +3, by the way, the only player that's been better than him is Philip Broberg, who's a +6 and hasn't played in the last 9 games when the Blues have been losing consistently.
Yeah. I mean, there really is no denying any of that, and I truly think people have their perception of Jordan Kyrou, and it's not going to be changed, regardless of what he does. You can look at this and say he has the best season on paper at the end of the year. I don't think anybody's going to care. Unfortunately, because it is a little absurd, but you kind of laid that bed earlier in your career, and you're just going to have to. Consistency is what takes people's minds off of what took place in the past.
Well, he's having consistency, and it doesn't matter.
And if you finish an 82-game schedule with this outcome, people are going to say, that was awesome. Do it again. I mean, look at Robert Thomas. Robert Thomas, people were not buying in on as a #1 center until last year.
Because he hadn't earned it, in my opinion.
The prior season, he had a really good season, but people were like, nope, not good enough. And then he had last year, and then it was like, oh, okay. It's going to come down to you can do it one season, but do you do it for multiple seasons? Then people will start buying into it.
He's Alex Ferrario. I'm Brandon Kiley. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Coming up next, we're getting to our NFL weekend look ahead. What are the biggest games in the week? The best matchups in the NFL this weekend? What's the potential biggest upset in the NFL this weekend? We'll get to that and much more coming up next here on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK from my friends at Victory Men's Health. It is time to unlock your inner champion, and the place to do so is with Victory Men's Health. They have 4 great locations across the St. Louis area, and you can check them out online. Do your own research over there at victorymenshealth.com. When you go to their website, it's a super easy process to book that first appointment. Top right corner, click book now, put in your name, email, phone number. Tell them a little bit about how you heard from them. Tell them BK with 101 ESPN sent you to Victory Men's Health. And then tell them how they can unlock your inner champion. Maybe it is some weight loss goals that you've been looking to meet. Get a head start on those potential New Year's resolutions that you have. They can help you do that at Victory Men's Health. If you don't feel like you have the same energy that you once did, you're not getting the same results that you had previously from your workouts, that could be a sign of low testosterone. They can check for that in that first appointment. Erectile dysfunction issues, they can help you out with that as well. It's all available for you at Victory Men's Health. Again, 4 great locations across the St. Louis area. They helped me unlock my inner champion. They can do the same for you. VictoryMen'sHealth.com. That's VictoryMen'sHealth.com.
ESPN Sports Center.
I'm Jordan Deacon. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Last night, the Blues welcomed in the San Jose Sharks, where they came away with a 3-2 shootout win, and Jordan Binnington is officially tied for most wins as a goalie in Blues history. The Blues are back in action tomorrow night right here on 101 ESPN as they take on the New York Islanders. Pre-game coverage starts at 5:30, and then puck drop is at 6:30. But before that Blues game, we've got Colts versus Lions pre-game for you starting at 10:30. And then on Sunday, the NFL tripleheader begins at 11. I'm Jordan Deacon. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Wall-to-wall Blues coverage is right here. 101 ESPN is live from the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light and E&B Granite. Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
It's time for NFL Weekend Look Ahead. We go through the best matchup of the week, the upset of the week, the overreaction Monday game from the weekend. We'll do all of that right here on BK and Ferrario over the course of the next 7 minutes or so. Alex, what would you say if you were sitting down on Sunday, you only were able to watch 3 hours, any one individual game? What is the game that you're going to be tuned in for on Sunday?
Well, as BK likes to say, the early slate's apple picking Sunday because
what would this weekend be? We're not putting
Christmas
up the
lights
yet.
Sunday.
No, we're not there yet.
You got to get it before it gets too cold.
You got one more week. You got 1 week left. Next week is when you could go ahead and put I don't care. You can put it for Christmas lights whenever. It doesn't bother me.
I gotta do it before I fall off the roof. But regardless,
Sunday feels like a good day to do it. It's fairly going to be nice
too. I'm gonna be out there picking the leaves up, cleaning the yard. So Green Envy's going to be able to take care of us later on.
It's Sunday yard cleanup day.
So to skip over those noons, and I'll tell you the one that I'm going to be locked in on. It's Cardinals Seahawks. I think Circa Sports had it at Pick'em. And they're not appealing teams in terms of, I feel like one of these is a Super Bowl contender. It's appealing to, I think, one of those two teams are going to be the winner of that division this season. And I don't know who it's going to be. I'm leaning towards the Seahawks in that game, but I think anytime I've got a pick-em of two very similar teams, those are always entertaining. Plus, they're a division opponent, so that's going to be the one that I'm going to be locked in on.
That's a good one. It's a really fun matchup because I don't really know what to make of either of those teams, and I feel that way about the entire NFC West, and that's what I'm going towards. Another game that includes a team from the NFC West, also in the 3 o'clock slate. 49ers versus Packers. I think it's the best matchup going into the weekend. I've got the 49ers in this one. I totally understand if anybody feels otherwise. It's in Green Bay. That gives me a pretty significant pause to this game. Who are the San Francisco 49ers? Who are you? Because I still am leaving the light on, but I've been doing this with Cincinnati all year as well. At some point,
gotta turn it off.
I've got to see this season what I thought I was going to see coming into the year. You have lost against Minnesota. You lost against the Rams. You lost against the Cardinals. You lost against Kansas City. At a certain point, you got to beat a good team, dude. And they haven't really done that so far this year. So this would be an opportunity to do it. If you lose this game, though, next week you're on the road at Buffalo. Suddenly the season could be going in the wrong direction quickly. They still have to play a game against Detroit as well. Whew, it could get ugly quick in San Francisco. This is the last game where I could really, truly buy it if I'm believing in the 49ers. So to me, matchup of the week, game I'm most curious about is the 49ers traveling to Green Bay, 3-point spread against the Packers. Alex, what's your upset pick of the week? If you had to pick one game and you're looking at it and you're thinking to yourself, I think that might go in the other direction that people are thinking, what would that game be for you?
I don't know if people consider it an upset, but the point spread shows it's an upset because it's a 3-point line. I'm taking the Rams over the Eagles. I'm a little surprised they're the underdog. Now, I know Eagles are the high-flying offense right now. Doesn't sound like they're going to have Devontae Smith. I've made it very clear that I don't trust that team. I do trust the Rams offense, and like the Eagles defense hasn't been anything sexy to me. It's a home game for the Rams. It's Sunday night football. The Rams are still trying to keep their playoff hopes alive. Man, I think the Rams win that one straight up, and I also like the over in that game. So that would be my underdog pick.
It's a fascinating game as well. I don't know how much I believe it, but I'm going to go for it nonetheless. How about Chicago? Just had a tough loss last week against Green Bay. They should have won that game, dude. They should have won that game. You got Minnesota at home this week. Minnesota has been leaking oil. Now, they're winning these games, but they're really close, and they're against bad teams. They won a one-score game against Indianapolis. They won a one-score game against Jacksonville a couple of weeks ago. Won a game last week by 10 against Tennessee. The offense just doesn't look the way that it did early in the season. They've only scored more than 23 points once since September came to a close. Darnold is making some mistakes now. Their running game isn't what it was early in the season. They've got to get a little bit off of Aaron Jones' plate. This is the type of game that I could see Chicago winning like 23-20.
Yeah.
So give me the Bears at home and an upset over the Minnesota Vikings.
I thought you were going to take the Panthers over the Chiefs because, boy, that one's looking like a sexy upset pick right now. Bryce Young.
I mean, if you have the cojones to take that, feel free.
Jonathan Brooks making his debut. Adam Thielen's back from the injury.
Coker potentially out.
You better watch out, Chiefs. By the way, if they lose that game, I'm done with your Kansas City team.
Yeah, they're going to win that game.
No Super Bowl contender.
I can tell you how that game's going to go. They're going to win it 20-13.
Oh, that's embarrassing.
Yeah, that's how this team works.
Embarrassing.
All right. What is your overreaction Monday game of the week, Alex?
Man, I think the overreaction Monday is going to be that 49ers-Packers game. And it's to the point that you said. People are going to turn the light off on the 49ers if they lose that game.
And they should, in my opinion.
Sure, but
there.
No, because I think they could still sneak in, unlike the Cincinnati Bengals. And if they sneak in, I will not discount a team that's got McCaffrey, Samuel, although Ayuk's done. Yeah. And then that
Jennings,
defense. That defense, to me, is something that can change, just like the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like, I don't think the Pittsburgh Steelers can do anything dangerous because they don't got a good quarterback. Brock Purdy at least has got Shanahan to where that offense could figure it out. So as much as I think people will turn the lights off on the 49ers, I'm not going to be so quick to do that if they lose that game.
So I like the game that you picked as your upset, the Eagles versus the Rams. My actual overreaction Monday game would be the Ravens versus the Chargers game, regardless of what happens, where there's going to be crazy takes on Tuesday, but that doesn't apply for Monday. That would be Tuesday because it's a Monday Night Football game. So Sunday night, Eagles on the road at the Rams, 3-point favorite, as you mentioned, in favor of Philly. If Philly loses this game, the takes on Monday are going to be insane.
Fire Sirianni!
Exactly.
Or Sirianni, not
Sirianni will be under fire, despite the fact that his team is 8-3 at that point on the season, and they've been playing some really inspired football. The next week, they go on the road at Baltimore. They still have a game against Pittsburgh, on the road at Washington as well. Their schedule is not easy the rest of the way. They can still finish like 10-7, which is a good season relative to preseason expectations, but not what you anticipate when your team starts 8-2 over the first 10 weeks of the year. Meanwhile, on the other side of things, I think people will be ready to buy in on the LA Rams if they're able to win this game. Suddenly, T-Bone's Rams will start feeling a little bit of confidence because you got the Saints, who everybody's trying to beat up on these days.
Easy.
Coming up next week. You still got a game against the Jets, couple in the division against Arizona and Seattle, another one against San Francisco. Suddenly they become a really big, I don't even know if you would consider them to be a sleeper pick, but a trendy pick suddenly to win the NFC West once again, now that they're healthy with both of those big-time wide receivers back in the lineup.
I mean, let's say in this scenario the 49ers pick up the win. You say that the Cardinals lose, Seahawks win, Rams win. Everybody's 6-5 in that division. And then you're looking at it's like, okay, well, who's the team that's going to be tough to beat? Well, the 49ers haven't been clicking yet. The Cardinals and Seahawks, it's nice you're here, but...
And I don't trust either of their defenses.
No.
And I don't trust the Rams either, but at least they've got the superstar power, man.
Yeah, you've got
those
Williams,
two receivers are real.
Kupp, Nakua, and Stafford. So, that's the lineup that I would trust if everybody is 6-5 with an even field.
The Rams offense just feels so much different when you have both Cooper Kupp and Puka Nakua on the field. Yeah. And I know that's an obvious statement, but last week, he was 13 for 19 for 225 yards, Matt Stafford was, when targeting those two players. That's a different vibe than when you're throwing to Tutu Atwell and Demarcus Robinson and the also-rans that they had through most of the season. So I'll go with that as my potential overreaction Monday game. For Alex Ferrario and Jordan Deacon, I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up next, we're going to hit the BK and Ferrario Rewind and close things up for this week here on 101 ESPN.
Blues talk more often. 101 ESPN is live from the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light and E&B Granite. Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. Let's run it back with the Daily Rewind on BK and Ferrario. Brought to you by Gloria Loom. Your home sold guaranteed realty. Selling your home begins at GloriaHasTheBuyers.com.
Ferrario and Jordan Deacon, who's done a fantastic job for us back in the studio today. I'm Brandon Kiley. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. If you guys missed anything from today's show, be sure to check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Center.
All right, Alex, to hit the BK and Ferrario Rewind today, let's open up or finish with where we opened, and that is with the St. Louis Blues, who got a win last night in overtime and then eventually in a shootout. Let's start with Jordan Binnington, who made Blues history. He is now tied as the winningest goalie in franchise history. What did you take away from him getting that opportunity and the way that he did it, to do it in a shootout?
Yeah, I think Mike McKenna was right, and you can hear his comments on that from the show on that podcast page. But, you know, I think it is pretty poetic of how he won that game, to where Jordan Binnington was the sole responsibility of picking up that 2 points, and that was that save to wrap up that shootout in the third round. I think the narrative around Jordan Binnington to wrap up to where you're going to lead the team in franchise wins is so poetic, because for the longest time, the Blues were without a number one goaltender. It was always a tandem. It was always, could this guy be the number one goaltender? You know, they trade away Ben Bishop, and he goes on to have success in Tampa and in Dallas. Jake Allen has his ups and downs. Carter Hutton, Brian Elliott come out of nowhere as backups. You trade for Ryan Smith. Yara Halak doesn't work out. They were always searching for the guy. And then a player that was basically told he's going to the East Coast Hockey League, he told them, bleep you, and they sent him to the Providence Bruins in the American Hockey League, and he gets called up and he wins this team the Stanley Cup, and then goes on and carries a team to where they have a chance to win another cup. COVID happens, and then drags them out of a retool. I think it's so poetic that Jordan Binnington is going to be at the top of this list. And what I'm more interested in is how far he can go with it, because Jake Allen was 3 wins away from doing what Jordan Binnington is about to do. And then he was traded in the offseason to Montreal. Jordan Binnington's got 2 more years beyond this season. And Jordan Binnington is a guy that typically wins about 20 to 28 games. Man, if you do that, you could be talking about 200-plus wins in franchise history, and I think it's so fitting that he's the guy that's doing it and the guy that's carrying you out of this retool, because without Binnington in between the pipes, and I know I'm going to sound like the honk here, you're talking about multiple first overall draft picks for how bad the Blues have been the last couple of years.
Blues off tonight, back in action tomorrow, 9-11-1 on the season. They're going through that New York swing. New York Islanders tomorrow, Rangers Monday, New Jersey Devils on Wednesday, Alex. Who do you think ends up in net tomorrow in New York? You think they go with Binnington or Hofer? I'd probably go Binnington coming off of that one, right?
Yeah, I think you got to keep going Binnington. You ride the hot hand right now. They go with schedule there. Now, Hofer did pick up that shutout win against the New York Islanders, so maybe you go with the same look there. But with a game on Saturday, a game on Monday, a game on Wednesday, you have the opportunity to play one of those guys twice. My gut would be Binnington gets the first 2 and Hofer gets the last one. But you could also go, Hofer gets this one, give a few days off for Binnington, and then he plays those last 2 games going into the Thanksgiving break.
You'll be able to hear the pregame coverage tomorrow right here on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. Alex will have that coming for you tomorrow at 5:30. Puck drop for that tomorrow in New York at 6:30. Mizzou back in action tomorrow as well. There'll be an early game, midday, so you're going to go Mizzou game and then straight into the Blues game. Mizzou versus Mississippi State on the road. Mizzou has really had their struggles on the road so far this year. got destroyed by Texas A&M, lost 34-0 against Alabama, and then, of course, last week, the heartbreaker at South Carolina. Got their opportunity to win their first road SEC game of the season. They're now a 9-point favorite on the road at Mississippi State. I actually think they will cover that spread, Alex. My only concern with this, and the reason I didn't bet it, is because of the lack of motivation. They don't have a lot to play for at this point, but they talk so much about the brotherhood and how much it means to them to be together. I think they're going to want to go out with a 10-win season once again, do that in back-to-back years, I think it's the third time that would have happened for Mizzou in the last 60 years to have back-to-back double-digit win seasons. So still something to play for, even if not all that meaningful. I've got Mizzou minus the 9 against Mississippi State. Illinois in action tomorrow against against Rutgers. Who do you like in that one? That's basically a pick-em.
I like Illinois. I think they're going to be kind of in the same boat that the Missouri Tigers are in. Like, hey, let's capitalize on a season and end it on a positive note, even if there's no playoff aspirations for us anymore. You go for a decent bowl game, but more importantly, you overachieve from what the expectations were at the beginning of the season.
I think that Rutgers wins that game.
Don't
tell T-Bone that.
You're just saying that because you don't like T-Bone.
I do like Rutgers in that game to be able to win straight up. The other thing tonight, you've got a non-tender deadline for the MLB. For Major League Baseball, the Cardinals do have one guy that's a potential target for that, which is John King. Don't be too surprised if he's a non-tender candidate tonight. Another guy that could be non-tendered by his new team is Dylan Carlson. We'll see what comes with that. That is coming up later on this evening. For Alex Ferrario and Jordan Deacon, who did a fantastic job back in the studio for us today, I'm Brandon Kiley from the ENB Granite Studios out at the Centene Community Ice Center. Again, if you guys missed anything from the show, be sure to check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com. The free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
Coming up next, it is a special edition of the Fast Lane with the one and only Brad Thompson making his return to the show. No CD, no Jamie Rivers. Jamie is on location. He's going out to New York for the games, of course, over the weekend. So enjoy listening to Stalter and BT coming up next here on 101 ESPN.